We've been taught everything except how to be human. Welcome to Human School, where remarkable people turn raw, unfiltered experience into practical wisdom. I'm Miles Edcox, and this podcast was born from the belief that you don't graduate from being human. You just get more honest about the lessons. If you're ready to stop performing your life and start participating in it, you're in the right place. This is Human School, where we finally learn what matters most. Today's guest is someone who has lived on some of the biggest stages in the world, yet carries himself like a man who never lost touch with front porch values. Most people met him through a decade of record-shattering success. Stadiums, singing along, charts lighting up, and genre stretched in ways that changed country music forever. But what I've come to appreciate most about him has very little to do with the spotlight moments or statistics. Because before he's an artist, he's a man of integrity. Before the accolades, he's a present and intentional husband and father. And before the brand, he's a friend who shows up consistently, quietly, and with a depth that's rare in this business. I'm grateful to sit with him today, not just to talk about the artist everyone thinks they know, but to introduce you to the human I've come to know and admire. Please welcome my buddy, Tyler Hubbard.
I felt great, buddy.
Welcome, buddy.
Thank you for the intro.
I'm glad you're here. There's
Kind words.
Yeah, you got it, man. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I could have been in there. And that's one of the things I was excited to sit down with you. You know, you and I have done this before. You were kind of a go-to for me because we're good buddies. And you've been kind enough to say yes over the years when I was doing other podcasts, whether it be with Onsite or The Unspoken back in the day.
Yeah,
years
man.
ago.
Of course.
But it did feel like at that time we were talking about FGL and talking about the challenges of the road and all that stuff. And one of the privileges of being a friend is getting to see the guy behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've shared this with you before as you've kind of broken out and gone solo. I'd still love to hear parts of those stories because I think those stories are rich with some wisdom. But I think there's other parts of you that I'm super excited for that story to continue to be told. Mm-hmm. I know you're kind of what probably feels like you're on the front end of embarking on that journey, which is kind of cool because you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, you've been in this town and chasing music for a long time, and you might assume based on the brand that you've had tremendous success building, and now you're retooling a brand number two and had success building it too, that people know you. But I think in some ways people know you by the brand and maybe not the guy behind it. So you think that fits?
I think that definitely fits, you know, talking to you and then even just kind of taking my own assessment over the last month or two as we've kind of been chatting about that. I'm like, yeah, I don't think people really know me, and I think I've done a poor job of leaning into parts of who I am that people can connect with, you know, and my weaknesses, my struggles, my successes, my victories, and everything in between, you know, and a lot of times it's just been about the music, you know, and my story and what God's done is so much bigger than the music, and so it's it's an exciting time. I've really, even just chatting with you last week, kind of got me really excited and got my wheels turning about, man, what is that? What are those pieces of my story that I want to share, and how do I get my story out there? And so, yeah, I'm excited to dive in, excited to go deeper with not only my fan base and my audience, but also, you know, new fans and new audience. And and obviously this podcast is special to me because I get to hang out with one of my best friends, and, you know, I can get as real as I can get with you. So this is an exciting opportunity, and maybe the beginning of, you know, really getting out there and telling my story.
I love that. And I'm curious up front, you have one of my favorite things about you is you'll tell the truth. Sometimes boldly, sometimes sharply. We've talked about these. Sometimes I've supported you. I was like, all right, we got to govern it a little.
Right.
And you've done the same with me as a friend. You were like, hey, you might not want to say that to your wife today. Maybe wait till tomorrow. But you're a truth teller, which I really admire and I like. And I was curious when we were talking recently. I was like, what? I know you, and I know you've wrestled with some demons. I know you care about redemption and grace and second chances. I watch you mentor and usher a lot of other people based on your own life experience. And then a lot of people don't know your life, like you said. And I asked you, I said, how come? You know, has it been hard for you to tell that part of the story? And you quickly shot back. I don't know if you remember what you said, and I won't remember it exactly, but I related to it. I didn't tell you when you told me, so I'll tell you now. You said something to the fact of like, it's not that I don't think it's interesting. It's just I care about the art so much that I don't necessarily want to come across as I'm a victim based on what I've experienced in some kind of way. Yeah, I've had hardships. Yeah, I've faced some challenges, but look at what I'm living a good life. And I don't know. Sometimes that narrative feels boring to me, or it feels like people wouldn't be interested in it. You said something like that, but it was a lot more curt and short. And the part I can relate to that I wish I'd have done then and kind of missed the moment was the first time I did a podcast, I had a co-host. And the reason I had a co-host was I just thought I was a little too boring to carry one by myself. I literally said I did. I thought I need somebody that brings a little more color, a little more personality, because I can be, you know me, I can be a little serious, kind of a flat affect. And this time around, I'm like, I've grown a little bit. It's been 8 years. And I'm excited to tell the world a little bit about who I am, because I'm starting to like that part. It's not that I had this huge part where I didn't like it. I've done a lot of work over that over the years. I guess I'm getting more excited to share that part with the world, I think. I started this whole thing released yesterday. Of course, this episode will be backed up a little way. And I already started getting a lot of love, and then I got the criticism too.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, of the hundreds of great comments, I camped out on the one.
Right, yeah, like they all
as
do.
we do. But there's been a part of me that has always shared that narrative a little bit, that is like my tools are great out front. My story should only be shared when necessary, and I'm pretty good behind the curtain on that part.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from for you?
Man, good question. I think, how do I say it? I don't think I'm necessarily drawn to people who usually take the victim mentality or the victim approach. And I think subconsciously I've just wanted to be an optimistic, positive guy. And maybe, honestly, as you were saying that, I felt like maybe there's also a fear of this concept that no one will really even believe me or connect with it, because everyone already thinks, well, I'm just some big songwriter, country music singer that doesn't have any real world problems, and all my problems are first world problems and this and that. And so I'll just, there's no need for me to tell stories of loss or stories of struggle or stories of, traumas that have maybe happened over the years for me, just because, well, still life's pretty good. You know what I mean? And I just think, I don't know, there's something in me that just wants to lean more into the optimism, the positivity, the outlook on life being bright and half, glass half full kind of situation. And, but also, like, I enjoy being vulnerable. Like, I understand the value of that. I connect most with my friends and my people when we're both vulnerable and we can lean into our struggles and what we're going through and what we've been through and how we got out of it. And I think we can all learn from that. So I probably sold myself short of connection with people because of that, alone. We know that people don't connect on strengths, and they connect on their vulnerabilities and their struggles, and so, but on the flip side, I do think there's something about me that just wants to stay strong, stay positive, head up, and kind of be that guy, even though we've all been through stuff. And so yeah, for better or worse, I think that's just sort of the approach I've taken. And I think the people I've surrounded myself with have allowed me just to lean in on the music and the brand and not worry so much about the personal and the struggles and the real life stuff, And so yeah, I think I probably sold myself short, and I probably sold the fans short on really letting them in on who I am and giving them things that they can connect with and grasp onto, other than just, oh, that's the guy that was in FGL and he's a songwriter in Nashville, and that's about what they know. They might know that I'm incredibly in love with my wife and my 3 kids, but that's about the extent of it,
Well, I have a hunch, and I just got a little clear on, I don't know if it's right or not, I'll fish with you a little bit, is I do think you're really principled. I know that about you. If there's anything I see you get frustrated or aggravated with other people, yourself or other people, if anybody pushes into your principles or your integrity, or you feel like you're getting out of alignment. So it sounds like if your perspective on vulnerability was, because what's ironic is you're exactly right. You practice that in real life. Mm-hmm. I know that because we're friends. You literally lead and practice for that. That's why I've always said, I was like, man, I had no idea. 2 years into our friendship, I was like, whoa, there's so much more depth to this guy than I ever knew as a fan of your work and your music. And you live that way, and yet putting yourself out there to you started to feel a little bit like a victim. And I think when you see that, if you see people trying to capitalize on their pain stories, it probably pushes into integrity and congruency and honesty.
I think you're right. Yeah, exactly. Capitalizing on that is probably a good word, where it's like, you know, I don't want to use this. I don't want to use the loss of my dad as a opportunity to talk about poor, pitiful me, or even bring people to my world, or use that to capitalize on trying to sell music or any of that. Like, you know, so that's a good, you know, or even, you know, even the false narratives that have been out there, you know, and taking the approach of, oh, let's just not pour any gas on the fire and it'll eventually die out, you know, like that whole mentality too of just sort of taking, like that kind of goes a little bit against who I am as a person. You know, I like to kind of take things head on and I attack things, and I'm, you know, I like to set the record straight, be truthful, be honest, and I'm a very straight shooter. And so, you know, even advice like that sometimes but it's also easy for me to buy into that, because it's like, well, yeah, I don't necessarily need to lean into these things or that things. I'll just stick to what we're trying to promote or whatever, and stick to the basics and check the boxes and do that. And so, yeah, I'd say, you know, those two things both have kind of probably held me back a bit to leaning into that, you know.
I'm curious if there's another factor, and I'll just ask you about it, because I'll take the liberty and probably be a little bit more risk forward since we're buddies.
Yeah.
I can miss it and you can bat it back. It's just fine.
Let's do it.
Is there any part of you that you mentioned the loss of your dad, and I'd like to get into that. I want to hear a little bit more about Roy and kind of that that chapter of your story. But before we get there, is there any part of you were you 20?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any part of you that feels like you're protecting that 20-year-old's heart that lost his dad way too soon, and you feel like if you open that portal up to other people that it might be more than you're bargaining for?
I don't know. Maybe a little bit, you know, but I've also kind of leaned in, not super publicly, you know, but I've kind of dove in head first on that a few times, you know. But again, I do think it's just one of those topics that's just easier I love talking about my dad. I love talking about the story when people ask, but other than that, it's not one of those things that you just want to bring up all the time, you know, that you really want to dive back in and relive all the time, or, you know, even carry that emotion or that weight or the trauma of that happening. Even though I've come a long way since then. Obviously it's been 18 years, but it's still the biggest trauma I've ever been through and the biggest life-changing moment of my life, you know, as far as that goes. And so yeah, there might be a part of that that's a bit protective, you know, and kind of in my head, it's like, all right, I've dealt with that enough, or you know, talked about it enough, or whatever the case may be, just to kind of not put it under the rug, but at least let it live in the back seat, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think there's a difference between, because I'm kind of turned off a little bit too by the concept of a blame cycle or a victim mentality. But I think there's a far stretch between using a victim narrative for gain, either self-protection or to capitalize and pull people in, versus just being vulnerable about your life. Mm-hmm. Here's the things that have been hard. Here's the things I put together that have helped me get through those things. That's the conversation you and have all the time.
Right.
And I think that clouding one with the other when there's a big gap between the two could be part of the challenge. And the only reason I bring that up front, it's not that I intended to work out that narrative in front of all of our friends here, but I do think, I love that you're stretching, and I want to see you get more comfortable doing that. But I think people need to be thoughtful about the why behind what they're about to partake on.
Right.
And I think you've shared with me, I do feel in this season that I'm more ready to share myself. Mm-hmm. I'm ready to go let people know who I am. Not who I was when I had that 10 years big run with FGS, who I am now as a dad, father, and husband. Yeah, some of that has to do with my past. Some of it has to do with my present. I'm so proud of that and excited for that. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure you really get your feet into the why, because I've seen a lot of people get out front with what's working, and they kind of pimp vulnerability. I've seen this when vulnerability got cool and started to trend, and I've done it. I've made the mistake. I literally have gotten up on stages before and probably overshared some current part of my story because I felt like that's what the room needed to warm them up emotionally or whatever. And then you catch yourself later and it's like, what was that about? What's the why behind that? Was I trying to get some kind of validation I didn't need, or blah, 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 or try to get something out of them, manipulate the scenario? I think it's good to always zoom out and check ourselves.
Yeah.
But you and I both have watched that trend where, whether it be pastors or artists or politicians, where you kind of pimp out your vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I know enough to know that that's not what you're after, but I also know you're putting on a new pair of shoes.
Right.
And so that's why I wanted to usher in the why. I think the why is pure.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see you step into it.
Thanks, Miles. I appreciate it.
If you've been listening to this podcast, then you probably already have picked up that doing inner work to try to optimize your lives and relationship is not something that you can just think your way into. It's something that takes a minute to pause and to take a look under the hood with people that you really trust and care about. And I am so fortunate. You've probably heard us mention Onsite a time or two, and that's my baby. I get to work with the best team in the world that offers these immersive experiences, therapeutic coaching, counseling opportunities for people to come in for a few days and take a look at what matters most and how do we reprioritize our relationships and get our feet on the ground emotionally and spiritually. If you'd like to check out any of our services, we have a beautiful campus just outside Nashville in Tennessee and another one in Southern California just outside San Diego. We also offer some things online. We have a longer program called Milestones that serves people that have experienced a lot of stressful or traumatic circumstances in their lives. But if we can support you in any way, I would encourage you to check out experienceonsite.com. And you can call us at 1-800-341-7432. And look, our services don't have to be the services you engage with. It doesn't cost anything to make a phone call. As a matter of fact, we train our folks to be able to help triage and refer people to the right resource wherever you may be. We're just in this to try to help people collect dots, connect dots, optimize their lives and relationship, and truly live into who you can become. Let's talk about, talk about the origin story. Let's go back just a little bit. I want people to hear a little bit about that. Tell me about growing up. What was it like for you? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, man. I just grew up real small town, kind of stereotypical country lifestyle, growing up small town, Georgia, little place called Monroe right outside of Athens. Very middle class, very blue collar, very hardworking family. I grew up, loving being outside, doing everything, from fishing to riding my dirt bike to jumping on the trampoline and playing basketball. I got a lot of memories of just being a kid. And now my kids are 5, 6, and 7, and I literally just watch them do the same thing. And it just takes me back to being a kid, running around outside and climbing trees and kind of what you sort of envision the American dream as a kid being, just small town life, shooting BB guns and just, kind of hanging out outside and being adventurous. And so that's the majority of my early years. I do have, if we go way back, when I was really young, my dad, we'd load up a trailer every weekend and go race motocross across the Southeast. So there was also a very rigid part of my life. There was a very almost military style work ethic work ethic, even around dirt bikes. Racing motocross at the time was very serious, even at 5 years old, to be honest. And I remember
uber competitive. You mean
uber competitive, right? And I just remember, for better or worse, Dad was like, if you need to be practicing every day. You're going to be with the best. You need to race with the best, and be, if you're going to be the best, you got to want it and practice every day. And eventually I just got to the point, I was probably 8 years old. I just remember being like, Dad, I don't want to practice every day. You can sell it. I don't want to do this.
You said that at 8?
Yeah. And so I was just burnt out. And anyways, I just remember being like, all I want to do is jump on the trampoline with my friends and hang out. I don't want to be, essentially pursuing a collegiate level athletic career at 7 years old. Yeah. And so, anyways, just very simple life. Grew up bouncing around school to school, moved down to Gulf Shores 1 year with my family when I was in 6th grade, went to school down there. My dad thought it'd be fun. We bought a condo as an investment, and then he got a wild hair and thought, let's just live at the beach. So, of course, in 6th grade, there's nothing better than living on the beach, and so did that for a year. Then we missed Georgia, missed the country, and ended up moving home. And my dad was in the mini warehouse business, and he was a bit of an entrepreneur, and did and was in the tree service business as well, and did a lot. I mean, basically that's what he did when he passed, was in the tree service business. And so I worked with him quite a bit, my teenage years, for him, I should say. And then decided, just like my dad decided, I'd rather work for myself than work for anyone else. And so pretty quickly I started my business detailing cars when I was 15. Had my mom drive me around, drop me off at a client's house, and I'd stay there for 6, 7, 8 hours and detail their car all day, and she'd come pick me up. And
how'd you learn to detail cars?
Man, I had one of my dad's friend named Ryan spent a weekend with me, and he had an old Suburban that was just grungy and dirty, and we spent about 12 hours inside and out, pressure washing the inside and doing, really deep cleaning the Suburban. And we got finished with it, and I just remember being so proud of it and just sitting in the driveway looking at it and thinking, man, we just brought that car to life. This is incredible. And it kind of worked towards my personality of pretty type A, pretty OCD, really liking to work and see the results of my work that day kind of thing, and so very rewarding for me at that age. And so I took a lot of pride in that and said, I'll be the best car detailer in Georgia, and bought a little enclosed trailer, lettered it up, started a business, and ended up quitting all my sports I was playing in high school, which was just baseball and basketball, because by the time I got my license, I was ready to go. I'd rather go wash cars and make money, and so so I did that all through, 16, 17, 18.
You feel like that drive at that age came from the 5 and 8 year old?
I think so, yeah. Just watching my dad and the hustle and the drive and the things that he had taught me over the years. And I thought, man, I want to, I enjoy building something. This is fun. I'm just like, I was a lot like my dad, in a lot of ways, but specifically that way for sure.
It's very driven.
Very driven, very challenge oriented, loved a good challenge,
What happened at that conversation back when you were 8 and told him, I don't want to do this anymore? Did you end
It
up
was
quit?
pretty natural. It was one of those things where, I enjoyed working with him because that was our time together, but it became pretty intense, to be honest. And he was pretty hard on me, and I'm grateful for it. But I remember, I was the only white dude on the crew, basically. Maybe there was another guy or two, but it was mainly Hispanic crew that was just, super strong, super fast, like you name it. And my dad was like, no, you do not let them outwork you. You do not let them beat you to that limb or whatever. Like it was
This was
great.
You're working in the
this
tree
is
business.
when I was in the tree business
I
with
got you.
Dad, 13, 14, 15 years old. And so, I just really learned, man, I really like being out here by myself, rubbing on this car and listening to the radio all day and getting a suntan and not having anybody tell me what to do or how to do it, and he was proud of me. He helped me. He taught me business. He taught me how to get clients, how to get repeat customers, the importance of your value of your work. And at the beginning, he would show up after I was done and like really look the car over and really try to find, some cracks in the, or, whatever it was, a spot I missed or this or that. So he also taught me the importance of being diligent and doing a good job and working hard. And, so I got to reap the benefits of that.
Were you keeping the books and everything?
Yeah, it was simple books, but yeah, exactly.
You collected payments.
Yeah.
You do the sales, the collection, all of it.
I'd go home and divide it up into my 3 little envelopes and, savings, spending, tithing, and he taught me all that kind of stuff, which was really great. Obviously on a small scale, but I was making a heck of a lot more money than anybody else in high school, just doing that and having the freedom. I think for me, I just like the feeling of freedom. And I think having a little bit of pocket change in high school really gives a kid the freedom to say, yeah, I'm going to do something this weekend or take my girl out or whatever, where most of my friends were working for $7 an hour at CVS, and really there was no freedom in that. So I was already kind of planting the seeds of this is how I like to operate and figuring that out about myself. And honestly, Miles, I did car detailing all the way through college. Like I took my trailer up to school, and that was my job all through school as well, that I would, set my own hours, work when I could, but make enough money to kind of have some play money and got me through school as well. So up until music took off, that was kind of my main.
That was your gig.
That was my gig.
I know you today and know that you like things super clean. and organized.
As if I wasn't already OCD enough. Detailing cars for 10 years, man, it really takes it to the next level.
Do you think the OCD started with the car business or before the car?
It was before. I mean, I remember like being a kid, waking up, like making my bed perfectly. Like my clothes had to be all like folded right, put in the way right. You know, I was even ironing my clothes at a weird age or a young age. You know, like kids aren't ironing their clothes at 10 years old, but I don't know. I don't know what it was. My mom was kind of like that. My dad, not as much. My mom was, you know, and she also would teach me at a early age how to clean, how to vacuum, how to clean the bathrooms, how to do all the things. And I think I've always had a desire to make my parents proud. So I'm sure that was part of it too. And whether it was working outside for dad, even cutting the grass, like I did that for years. That was my kind of role in the house. And we had a big yard, you know, like 4.5 acres of grass I had to mow as a kid. And so even doing that, I just remember very, very specific, getting done and making sure those lines were dead straight. You know what I mean? Like I want dad to come home and be like, wow, this is incredible. You know, landscape companies aren't doing this good. And so, yeah, I guess I've just sort of always had that, whatever I'm doing, I want to do it great. But when it comes to being tidy and organized and orderly and structured, that's like teeing myself up to try to do something great. You know what I mean? It's one less thing. And maybe it's a bit of at this point, I think maybe it's a bit of a control thing, you know, and my life is so chaotic and hectic. But at 15, it wasn't hectic, and I was still that same exact way. So,
well, I think it's important to hear that because part of what we'll do throughout the conversation is I want to be able to try to extract and cherry pick certain things that I think people can relate to, patterns, themes, which you identified. Because sometimes the thing that later, and it may or may not be, you just alluded that sometimes it might be a challenge. It's kind of a gift and a curse.
Right, totally.
But often the things that are shadow parts of our stories later in life are real value adds early on. And so that probably was a huge part of your childhood that was perceivably served you well.
Right.
That you were neat, you cared, you had passion, all the stuff that came with it. Often, compulsive and obsessive behaviors are a response to overt pressure. Because if we feel pressure, and I know you alluded to having a little bit when you're in the early in the kid motorcycle days,
for sure.
Then you recognize at some point, and I don't know if this fits for you or not. You recognize at some point that there's only so much I can do, so much practice I can do to try to be successful on this track. And then there's certain parts that I can't control the outcome. And then if you've got a big push behind you, then often you'll be like, what can I control? And so sometimes you find pockets and patterns of I can control this. And often that's an origin story for OCD. We've never talked about whether it's, I don't know if you're joking or if you've ever gotten a formal diagnosis of OCD or if.
No, I usually say it in a casual way, but certainly just very orderly and neat. And I think what you said of just a little bit of control what you can control and do it well. I think that's kind of my MO. And on a good day, it'll let go of what you can't control, but what you can control, let's crush it. You know what I mean?
And you were entrepreneurially driven at a super early age. And when you got money that your friends didn't have at 15 to 17, well, I guess you mentioned it when you said you take your girl out on the weekend, but did you also get taught the financial strategies to be conservative and save and all that, or were you spending it, or what'd you like to spend?
No, it was pretty based around saving and being smart with your money and spending money wisely. And I mean, I would spend money on, for example, I just had a flashback. I would save up $1,000, and at the time that was a decent amount of money. You know what I mean? And then I would go down to the car auction and I'd buy a car for $1,000 that was potentially worth $2,000, and I'd go home and spend all day cleaning it up and making it look like a $5,000 car. And then I'd sit it out by the road and sell it for $2,500.
No, you know flipping cars.
Yeah, I did
what
that.
Age?
I probably did that like 10 or 15 times at like that age, like 16 years.
It's cool. I didn't know that. I've never heard that part of your story.
So yeah, I would just I can clean a car well. So how can I turn what would just be $150 or $100 into $1,000? You know, and
so you just go down there and pay cash for it.
Yeah, at the auction. Yeah,
and then you drive it home, clean it up, and flip it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was fun. I mean, that was like, I started to feel like a big kid. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, I'm like out here buying and flipping cars, and obviously they were just cheap cars, but if they ran, I could clean them up well and and resell them. So yeah, that was fun. And also Dad was just really smart in a way where he would help me turn a dollar into two, or figure out, hey, or set goals. I mean, I remember him saying, like, man, it'd be incredible if you could, like, you should set a goal to try to have 10 grand in your bank account by the time you graduate high school. And that goal I never reached, to be honest, at all. I think I might have had 2 grand or something but still, like, as a high school kid, I was making pretty decent money, and trying to be smart with it and learning those things. And I wasn't a big spender. I probably would just kind of spend it on what you would imagine, maybe a speaker for my truck and maybe take my girlfriend on a date here and there and hang out with my friends, but nothing really crazy. I wasn't making that kind of money to figure out where am I going to blow this. It was more like, all right. And then I was learning too, like if you make $100, you really are only keeping 40 of it. Pretty early on I was learning, and then 40 of it's good play money, but you want to maybe I want to buy myself something or just put some diesel in the truck, So it was, just all those lessons that you learn when you start making a little bit.
And you decided to take the business with you when you went to college.
Yeah, I mean, I took that business with me everywhere.
Did you want to go to college? Did you know college was coming?
This is a funny story. I thought college isn't for me because it wasn't for my dad. I really don't like school. I did everything I could just to scrape by in high school. Not that I wasn't a smart kid. I could have made straight A's. I just didn't care about it and didn't want to. And so I made straight B's and a C here and there, and it was fine. But I wasn't passionate about education or learning or school, right? At least that was what I told myself at the time. And then, so I was just, in my mind, I was just going to be like Dad. I was just going to get my college degree and start building a business, and if it was car detailing, I'll be the biggest detailer in Georgia. And if it's something else, then so be it. But I want to start working, and start instead of going to school. And so that was what I was going to do. And then I took a couple college visits with some friends and thought, man, this doesn't feel like high school, like this looks kind of fun. And then I really started feeling like, man, this might be something that I regret if I don't do this, because I think I'll miss out on a lot of fun and good memories. And I had a few people tell me, like, man, like you could take a year or two off and go to college, but ultimately, like, if you don't go now, you're probably not going to go. And it's only 4 years and you can work after school. You got your whole life to work. I started hearing all that and I started thinking, you know what? It can't hurt. My parents agreed to pay for me to go to school if I passed my classes. So why wouldn't I go? Right. So I applied to a few schools that I had been to in Georgia and thought that was cool. Ended up getting into one and thought that's where I'll go. I think it was Georgia Southern or something like that. And then I came to Nashville for a passion conference with my high school, which I graduated from a small Christian school. I went there the last 3 years of high school. Was the first class to graduate from this really small Christian school. We had 12 kids in my class, and
that is small.
And it was super small, but it was good for me. And like I said, I got to end up leading worship for the band at school, and I led worship at my church and really started getting my feet wet with music stuff in high school. But anyways, we went to Nashville for the Passion Conference when I was probably a junior, actually.
Is that Passion Conference the same thing it is today?
I think it is, yeah.
Like Louie,
yep, Louie and Chris Tomlin and all the guys.
Yeah.
And it was at Bridgestone Arena, and I went and had an incredible experience, and then really fell in love with Nashville and told my parents, like, Nashville's awesome. I love Nashville. We came up here as a family to visit Nashville and to visit Belmont, and ended up thinking, man, maybe I should go to college. And if I do go to college, like, what am I going to study? And all this was conversations. I mean, like I said, I had shown interest in going to some of these schools in Georgia, but didn't really know what I wanted to study. And then it kind of hit me that, music is a passion of mine. It's becoming a passion. Maybe if I study something in the music realm, I'll be able to stay interested enough to make it through 4 years of college,
Let's bookmark there for a second, because I'd like to hear where that spark started. If you go back, like, when did that music passion start?
To go back to me, it started in church, honestly. It started probably 7th grade. I just remember music being such a direct connection with Jesus, and that was one of my favorite ways to connect with him. So it became really powerful in my life. And And meanwhile, music had played a fun role in my life, nothing serious, but we grew up. I loved country radio. We were always listening to music. My dad was not a major music fan or music guy. We didn't go to a bunch of concerts, but just a lot of road trips and time together in the truck and just listening to music. And then, music was just sort of a part of my life in Georgia, rap music, country music, rock.
I was going to say, because we were on a workout schedule with some buddies for years.
Right.
And that was such a fun season. We need to talk about that at some
Let's
point.
get that going again.
But it was straight up hardcore gangster rap.
Yeah.
What we were working out to.
Usually, right?
And I've seen you rap, you got a little swagger. So I would have just assumed you grew up on hip hop.
Yeah, mainly hip hop, a lot of country.
Who introduced you to hip hop?
I would say mainly hip hop when my parents weren't around. That's what I should say. I mean, the pocket of Georgia where I grew up in, it was very, I don't know, music taste was, that's just what we all listened to. It was just a hip hop culture.
Was it diverse?
I don't know if it was just because it was close to Atlanta or an hour from Atlanta or what the case was, but
huge hip hop.
Very diverse town. A lot of my friends were black kids. We just loved hip hop, and we just, some of the first music I made, actually created, was me and 3 or 4 buddies in high school, just trying to make rap beats and making songs in our closet, So between me really having an interest in music and starting to have an interest in writing songs, as I learned to play guitar, I started thinking, man, it'd be fun to write songs, and started writing songs, and then starting to just experiment with my buddies, like making these beats and making these songs. It was like, man, this is really kind of fun. And then also getting the opportunity from a live perspective in church to get to lead worship, not only for my school, but for my youth group and my church, right? So I was just sort of, music was sort of my life in some capacities in high school.
You just got kind of immersed with it. And I'm curious.
Yeah, immersed with it. Yeah.
That the school the school that you were in, I guess it was a public school up until you got in that smaller Christian school towards the last 2 years.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing about me too, Miles. I don't know what this says about me, but I've joked for years and said I just enjoy being the new kid, because I would bounce around from school to school like every couple of years. Looking back, I went to Monroe Elementary School. I went to Monroe Middle School. Then I went to Gulf Shores for a year and went to that school and was obviously the new kid. Then I came back to the public school, and everybody treated me like I was a new kid because he's back, and it was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then, I don't know, a year or 2 after that, I moved to a little private school that was actually in Monroe as well, called George Walton Academy. Big private school. Stayed there for a couple years. Realized that's not my scene. Went back to the high school, the public school, which felt at home, but it was a different scene for sure, a little bit rougher scene. And then after my freshman year of high school, I do remember feeling like, man, this is rough. Like I just feel, and at the time as well, I was like pursuing Jesus, and I was just like really feeling pulled in that direction. And I just feel like, man, this is a dark school. And I'm just kind of like,
too many temptations.
It just felt like not a great fit. So I explored options, and I said, well, there's this Christian school at 25 minutes away, Loganville Christian Academy, and had a couple of my friends that went there. That's always, honestly, too, at that age, like, oh, my friends just went to that school, I want to go over here, and some of that. But ultimately, I did enjoy being the new kid and the new student for a year or 2, and then that would wear off, and I'm like, all right, time to move. But
in any of the schools you were in, of all the ones you listed, was it mostly majority black, majority white?
The public school was majority black, like 80% black.
Okay.
And then the private schools were like majority white, like 90% white.
Yeah.
So it was culturally, it was drastically different, which I enjoyed because I could be quite a bit of a chameleon. I really could fit in at either one of those schools and knew the role to play. But I tell you, it was interesting. When I went from the public school to the small Christian school, it was an absolute culture shock, because where I had come from, how you talk to the teachers, how you carry yourself, how you acted, how you behaved, how you looked at authority, all that was done in a certain way. And then when you move to this small Christian school, very conservative and very young, I would say, it was I learned in like a day, like, oh, the kids don't think this is cool here. Like like kids are wondering like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? And, again, I knew the church culture enough. I'd been in this world enough to realize like, oh, I see what we're doing here. You know what I mean? Like my approach has got to shift, and it did. And it was probably for the better. Cause then I spent 3 years at that school, and I still was probably more of the rebellious type for sure. But I was also the worship leader and had a leadership role, and they kind of put this like, they put this whole thing on me where I had to be above reproach and this and that, but they were also figuring things out. Great school and great people, but yeah, figuring out, are we gonna, how much pressure are we gonna put on these kids that took their shirts in? Like, how important is that? Well, at the time it was pretty important, but for me, I'm like, you guys are missing the point. You know what I mean? And so I struggled a little bit with authority, but to be honest, and being respectful in those things in my early years.
What do you mean your early years?
And even through high school. Yeah, I was about to say, well, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that's just something I've carried with me. But
well, it's interesting that the diversity that you grew up in, because when you got to Tennessee, and I grew up in primarily country music, a little bit of gospel music, and then my palette got really diverse too, but not because I was in diversity. I was just weird that I liked hip hop and I liked rock, I like heavy metal, I liked all that stuff, even though country was what I was most influenced by culturally. But when I would watch you, and you got a real Southern accent, but you got a hip hop swagger in a way. And I've seen you like make beats and beat by, and I'm like, where do you get all that? I remember one of the first times I went out on the road with you guys years ago, and I think maybe Nelly was on tour with you at the time.
Probably so.
And might have been some extracurritular stuff happening on the bus with Nelly, but it was, I was amazed because he had his crew there.
Right.
And watching you just fold right into that culture, that hip hop culture. And I was like, that's not a small town country South Georgia kid.
Right.
So I knew that influence had to come in somewhere. It's really interesting to hear that piece.
Yeah, honestly, like in Monroe, if you go there, you'll realize like, okay, you got your very small town farming guys, you got farmers, and then there's this fun little like mixing bowl where they also grow up with all these black kids, and these black kids grow up with all these white farming kids. So there's a really cool dynamic there, to be honest. It's unique. Actually, when I moved away and realized, even to Nashville, I'm like, oh wow, that culture was a bit unique for sure, And even when I moved here,
Nashville would be a lot more, it was majority white, it's more segregated.
Yeah, and you can imagine going to Belmont at 18 years old, and all of a sudden people from all over the country are new to Nashville. They're new to college. They're all 18-year-old kids from all over backgrounds, different scenarios and stories. And I just realized like, oh yeah, wow, like where I came from is definitely a bit unique for sure in that aspect. Most of the guys that looked like me and acted like me were drawn to a certain crew in college, and I was kind of drawn to the other crew. I was drawn to the black guys, and I was drawn to the athletes, and I was drawn to those people, and but also stayed true to myself, because that's just what that's just what it was in Georgia. I didn't know any different, and so. Well,
I think it's important. I'll finish that. Think about that sentence. I'd love to hear you finish it, because I stayed true to myself. Because I will say most of the great artists that I've had an opportunity to be friends with and work with, if they've had success at all, commercial success, is they really had this through line where they knew how to stay true to who they were at some level. So many of us lose ourselves in our profession. It happens to the best of them. But I notice you really try to do that. And I'm curious, you said it kind of comes from where you grew up, but anywhere else you might have picked that up where that was just really important to you? Either of your parents do that?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I was blessed to have a good example from my parents, from so many aspects, to be honest. I had great parents. But yeah, my dad certainly, was big, stayed true to who he was. He talked about how he was raised and how he grew up, and he was consistent, you know what I mean? He was the same guy every day, and I think even me leaning into who I leaned into and connecting with and being drawn to the people that I was drawn to in Nashville right away was probably me staying true to myself, right? In general, even though it looked a bit different than maybe you would expect. But
well, you make it sound easy, and for a lot of people, it's not. I'm thinking about my story, for example. I don't know that I got that imprint Well, I might have got that imprint, but I didn't know how to actualize it or facilitate it for myself, because I remember when I was doing my first internship in undergrad, it was in Absecon, New Jersey, and I was going to be a sports agent at the time. That's where I thought I was going to go. And so it was an LPGA golf tournament. And I was there for 2 months kind of learning how to do all that. And I had to put together the Pro-Am. It was one of my duties. And that's where the sponsors play with the pro. Mm-hmm. And so I had to call the sponsors. And usually the sponsors are wealthy entrepreneurs or business men or women. And I remember I was straight out of Hornwall, Tennessee.
Right.
And my accent was thick. Like some people would have to ask me, say, what did you say? Slow me down. And I went to straight up in the Northeast, straight in the heart of New Jersey. Right. And so here I am cold calling these people at these companies like, hey, this is Miles, and I had some New York responses.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Who the F are you? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. The minute I got that blowback, I was like, I better change. Mm. And I remember I learned quickly how to neutralize my language and my accent so that I could fit in a little bit more. Mm. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a bad skill per se, but that's one example of that period of my life. It was almost like a survival instinct. Whoever I'm around, I need to be more like. Mm. And then it ultimately came at a cost for me later on. Mm-hmm. And so not everybody has that skill. And I will affirm you for that, because that is a through line. Doesn't matter where you are, who you're talking to, President of the United States or somebody, you are yourself. Nothing changes. And I love that.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And I will say I've used the word chameleon a bit. I mean, there are times where I'm like, oh yeah, I just sort of shift. Even Hayley be like, wow, you just really just turned into, basically you just fit right into that crew. Like, no problem. And again, there's part of it that's like, well, it's because I have experience with this culture and it feels like home to me. So that's sort of a gift too, to be able to sort of shift around. And I'm not changing for someone specifically, but I do have multiple experiences in different cultures that allows me to fit in with the farmers and the country hunters and the country boys, and then also, different cultures that I've been able to be around. So, so I do think that's a gift. But even you just made me have a flashback. I remember being, and maybe it was an early age where I just accepted, like, this is who I am and I'm going to be proud of it. But I remember when I moved to Gulf Shores, Alabama of all places, was in 6th grade, and I had a couple of new friends. One guy was probably my best buddy down there. And I remember I'll never forget this, actually. We're out of school, we're walking to the carpool line, and I asked this kid, I said, can you help me talk right? Because I was getting a lot of, people were laughing at me for my accent. That's why I said in Alabama of all places. But it was Gulf Shores, it was on the coast. It wasn't your typical, kind of real thick Alabama. And so I just remember, asking this kid to help me learn how to talk where people didn't laugh at me. And then I don't remember, that was short-lived. I think he just said, whatever, obviously that conversation didn't go very far, but I think at that point, maybe I just decided, you know what, I'm not changing how I talk because people are laughing at me. And at some point, I think there's also this thing about me too, Miles, that I think is important to notice or to note. I've learned about myself when I go back and look at my past. I'm like, you know what I like to do? Whenever someone's doing something, especially if there's a large group of people doing something or pursuing something or doing this, I'll go the opposite direction, completely opposite. Because whether it's just a desire to stand out, whether it's a desire to go against the grain, I don't know, but it's what I'm naturally drawn to. So if for example, when I went to Belmont, thinking I was going to dive into music and figure out how to be great and learn all the music business stuff. Well, guess what? Everybody at Belmont was going to go there and do that. And they were great. It's a massive music business school. So everybody's not only there to study music business, but they're incredible musicians and artists and singers. And I just thought, oh, wow, I'm just one fish swimming in the same pond, the same direction. I put my guitar away for 3 years and didn't even get it out. And I was the guy, I said, how can I stand out around here? Well, I'm the guy that now rides. I got a crotch rocket. I'll buy a bike, and I'll be the guy that hangs out with the athletes and rides my dirt bike or my street bike around campus, and the socialite, if you will, and just hang out. I'll just be this guy. I don't want to be known as somebody else just trying to pursue music.
Where do you think that comes from? That going against the grain or that contrarian point of view?
That's a good question. I mean, I think part of it is my dad. I mean, he kind of had that uh, untraditional approach on life, do what people say you can't do, try to accomplish, what people say you can't accomplish, and do things differently, try to think outside the box and go against the grain. And I mean, he didn't really say that to me. I think I just was drawn to that kind of approach, and I think he reflected it well. And I also think maybe some of this is out of selfish, but even like thinking about what I was talking about with bouncing around schools, I think it was just, how can I just don't want to be one in another number of somebody doing the same thing. Maybe it's, how do I stand out? That's probably the underlying statement that, for better or worse, whether it's for attention or whether it's just for whatever reason, like how do I be different? How do I stand out?
Well, it may be tied also, because I think I've got some of this too, but it may be tied to that early pressure message of the only way, if you're going to do this, you got to do
practice
it
every day and do what everybody else is doing.
And it's almost like that developed the mindset. And for some people, I think you may have that mindset organically, but usually we get it mirrored or modeled to us in some way. And it seems like so far in your story, it's really working in your favor.
Yeah, I think so. Over the course of my life, it feels like a positive attribute that works well for me. Even thinking about back in the day, like everybody else was playing basketball. I decided, no, well, first of all, I'm not going to be a collegiate basketball player or in the NBA. So I'm going to start washing cars. I'm going to start something that nobody else is doing.
Oh, that's
Take
right.
a different approach.
Gave up sports.
Yeah, even though all my friends were doing it and this and that, and I liked the social aspect of it, but I didn't like the time management part of like I'm wasting 3 hours after school running up and down a basketball court to maybe play this weekend, And so yeah, it's just something that it's part of what fuels me, I think, and what drives me. And I think it did come from my childhood narrative and just the way I was brought up.
And then, so you found yourself in college, and you've got, you got there, and it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. There was a whole sea of people that were super talented. So you put your guitar away, started running around with, what was it? You said athletes.
Yeah. Mainly I was feeling like I connected with the athlete guys the most.
Basketball, baseball team in Belmont or something?
Yeah, basketball, and baseball guys.
Belmont's always had a pretty good basketball team.
Yeah. And I just felt like, I don't know, I just hung out with them and connected with them. And there were obviously a lot of great friendships developed as well in the music space. But again, I just kind of put my guitar in the back seat for a while and just thought, everybody's pursuing this and everybody's so good. And I'm not nearly as good as these people, So I'm just going to, let me figure out what I can be good at that not everybody else is good at, And so that was the approach in college. And I think going into college, I mean, I knew that Belmont was a big music school. I think I knew what I was getting myself into, but I think it just, once I was in it, once I was there and I was in the middle, I was just kind of like, and I don't even think it was intentional. Looking back, I wasn't like, okay, I'm not going to do music. It was just like, oh, wow, I hadn't gotten my guitar out in like a year. I thought I was here for music, and now I'm just not, just trying to get that degree and make some friends along the way. And I remember Dad saying, this is something that stuck with me. When I went to college, I thought this was the best advice. At the time, I didn't really understand it, but now looking back, it's the best advice. He did tell me, he said, now, son, I know college wasn't for me, but there's a lot of great things that you can learn in college. And he said, I'm willing to pay for you to go to school as long as you pass your classes. That's the one rule. If you don't pass, you pay. And then you're paying from then on. And second rule I want you to do is I don't care if you make straight A's. I don't care if you make straight C's. But he's like, I want you to get to know everyone's name at that school. And I thought, okay, I can do that. That sounds, I'm a social dude. At the time, I was really social. All I wanted to do was hang out. And so that was sort of my goal. The 4 years I was there was, let me just get to know everybody. Let me learn everyone's name. Let me be a social guy and have fun out here while I'm doing it. And then, in hindsight, it really pays off, because now half these people are working the industry and half of them are heads of labels or, doing different things. And you'd be so surprised how many people, whether they were in my class or not, I run into or take a meeting with or do something with, and they're like, yeah, I went to Belmont. And you're just like, man, like a lot of people went to that school. So those connections that I made, And obviously that's where I met BK. That's where the whole FGL thing started. Like,
Because he was an athlete.
he was a baseball player.
Pitcher, maybe?
He was a pitcher, yep. And so so we kind of ran in the same circles and knew of each other, and I knew he dabbled with music and writing songs. And so our senior year, we kind of hit it off and decided, man, let's, one thing led to the next, and next thing you know, I'm in a band, with a baseball player. And that was, the beginning of FGL. But had I not been such a social guy and kind of done what my dad said, I mean, I may or may not have hung out with the baseball guys, or I may or may not met BK, or, so in hindsight, it was good advice.
Well, it was kind of brilliant for you on your dad's behalf, because EQ outpaces IQ all day long in terms of predictable success.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we don't teach people in developmental years, 0 to 25, really all the way through college, is the social and emotional and relational elements of what your vocation will ultimately afford you, or what it will look like downstream. I will borrow a page out of that playbook. And I want to do it a little earlier than college, but I hadn't even thought about that. It's like the best thing you could probably do for somebody versus say, can you learn this text, is have you learned how to make a friend?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And in his case, it was a challenge. I want you to go and nudge you in that direction.
There's my expectation for you when you go to college. Exactly. And to teach our kids now that, you know what I mean? The practical implications of that throughout the rest of your life it never goes away. So.
And were you and your dad close all the way up through?
Yeah, we were close. We were really close. Even growing up, like we were kind of cut from the same cloth. We had tons of commonalities, more than I got a brother who's 2 years younger, and him and I couldn't be more different, to be honest. But me and my dad we were buddies. We were super close. And yeah, we're getting even closer as I, was growing up and moving out and going to college, and was able to kind of take on more of a friendship than just a fatherly, dictatorship, if you will. So that was fun.
Would it have been your, junior year or something like that when you were 20?
When he passed, I was a sophomore. Yeah. Yeah. And it was February. So, halfway through my sophomore year, something like that. So.
And when you were at home at the time?
Yeah, I'd actually driven home for the weekend, and I'd taken 2 of my buddies from college. And we were going to go down there because every year in February, me and my dad would go to the Supercross race in Atlanta. So that was still kind of a thing we did, and I'd drive down to Georgia, and we'd hang for the weekend and go to the race and all that. And so that's what we were doing that weekend. I went home, took some buddies, and we were getting ready to go to the race. Actually, that night, the night he passed away, we were getting ready to go. So fortunately, I mean, I was at the house when it all happened. And if you don't know the story, it was a tragic helicopter crash in my backyard, and so it was very graphic and very intense, but I was able to be there and support my sister at the time, who was 6 years old. That was tough, and be there for mom and all that. And my brother as well. So yeah, the whole family was there, when it actually happened. And, obviously unexpected crash, and, just a super tragic situation. But man, that was also part of what made me who I am. And the decision was made in that moment. Like that day, I have a vivid memory as well of just like talking to God and being like, all right, like this is what I've been training for with you. Like I can either lean into you and understand that you're in control and that you got my best interest at heart. And even though I don't understand this and I'm extremely upset, or I can go the other direction and and be another statistic and do the same thing that I hear can be, I can go down the other road, and be angry with God and take that route. And I just remember like making a decision in that moment to trust God and lean in on him. And it changed my relationship with God too, for sure. Like I truly felt him like I've never felt him before, and an unexplainable peace. It wasn't in the moment. Actually, it wasn't in the moment as well, now that I think about it. But it was the days and weeks after too, where, I was just trying to process with what I'd just seen and dealt with. And there was so much joy and peace that came along with all the grief and the pain, that was just unexplainable. And I just knew that was Jesus, wrapping his arms around me and protecting me and doing what he says he does, and so that was pretty powerful and a big blessing just to get to experience that too, like in a really, really tough time, and then to get to go back to school. And at that time, sorry, I'm just rambling now, but I'm really like reliving it a bit. There was a lot of questions. Do I stay home? Do I take care of mom? Do I take care of the tree business? Do I take over that? What do you do as a 20-year-old? I'm an adult, but I'm still a kid, kind of.
You were literally home for the weekend.
Yeah, home for the weekend. And I'm thinking, do I go back to college? What do I do, And what's my responsibility now? I got a 6-year-old sister that just lost her dad. Do I stay home and help parent her, And so
your buddies were there too? Were they at the
yeah,
house?
man, they were at the house as well. And
These guys you still know? Are you still friends with?
Yeah, I'm still friends with them. I need to connect with them again, but yeah, we've that bond is. One of them was really shook, probably more than the other. Where even before me, like when we got back to town, he was in therapy and doing stuff because it was
what he saw.
Yeah, what he saw.
So everybody saw. How long had your dad been flying helicopters?
He had been flying for probably a year and a half. And I tell this story often when I talk about it because my dad was such a worker. Like he always said, like my hobby is work. Like I love to work. And he had one other hobby, which was riding dirt bikes, and we would ride dirt bikes and we would work. That's what we did together. There wasn't a lot of, every now and then we'd go down to the beach and have a week with the family, but dude, it was like, that's what he did. He just worked and he enjoyed it. And if I wanted to hang out with him, I'd go to work. And so to see him have a new hobby, it was a lot of fun. Like he loved flying and he was really passionate about it and really excited.
It's not easy to get a license to fly.
And it's not easy to get a helicopter license. No, it's not easy to get any license. You got to have commitment and dedication. You got to want it. And to get even your fixed wing. But yeah, he was determined and learned to fly and he was a good pilot. And then he ended up buying this old helicopter from this guy that had flown in the military for like 30 years. He was an older gentleman, super cool guy. And long story short, he was up for the weekend helping dad, tinker on the helicopter and do a few little things and maintenance and stuff like that. And this guy was actually flying when they went down. So
they were both in the
helicopter.
I didn't know that.
They went down. They both passed away, but they claimed it was mechanical error. And, nobody really knows, but I do know that dad wasn't flying and it wasn't just a silly mistake on his part. And, really sad scenario, but ultimately, and he died at 43, which now I'm 38. And I'm just like, wow, that was like,
that's young.
That's young. Like I didn't realize it was that young when I was 20, but,
I'm just trying.
That's young.
I'm trying to envision it in a backyard and, you see the dramatic fiction side of when something like that happens in film and TV, and it's big. I mean, was it?
It was.
I don't want it.
Nothing was like blown up or in flames. It they came in to land, and we lived out in the. It's safe to say the woods. He had cleared out a spot and cleared out a bunch of trees. He was determined he wanted to land at the house, and I guess they just came in a little low, and they were going low and slow, and they clipped a limb, and when they clipped that limb, it just, the helicopter just went nose down into the ground, and on a helicopter, the motor's behind you, so the engine just crushed them, so it wasn't like explosive or fire, it was just debris and crushed bodies,
And did you guys go immediately to the scene? Or?
Yeah. So that was like, the kind of thing you have nightmares about for years,
Did you have nightmares?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Just like flash?
Not for years, but
like flashbacks?
Yeah, close my eyes and go to sleep and that's all I could see. Like that picture that stuck in my head, yeah.
Is it like the picture you walked up on or what you saw happen or both?
The picture I walked up on. I was actually in my bedroom. I didn't see the helicopter go down.
You got there before the police or ambulance or?
Yeah. So when it actually happened, I was in my bedroom and I heard the helicopter coming. So I thought, good, they're coming to land. We'll get ready to go to the race and all that. And then it went off. The sound of the helicopter was either they were there quick and turned the helicopter off or something kind of isn't right. And then my friend ran in the house and said, "Tyler, your dad just had a helicopter crash." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's a bummer." Like literally, I was like, "Oh, dang, that's a bummer." But my dad, like, you don't think you think your dad's invincible, and my dad was I mean, motorcycle crashes and things like it wasn't. I just thought, man, bummer. I hope he's okay. We'll go check on him. Like it wasn't. And I actually walked outside from my bedroom on this little balcony, and I could hear someone like screaming. And so I thought, oh man, this is kind of bad. Somebody's in a lot of pain. So I ran down there. It's kind of down this little hill, and realized that my brother was the one down there screaming, and he was the first one on the scene and just like screaming, trying to get my dad to wake up, but he was gone. He was gone immediately. And so for my brother too, like he was like first on the scene. I was probably second, and mom was probably third, or vice versa. I can't remember, but yeah, we were all like right there and ran down there, and it was just one of those scenes that you'll just never forget. But
at that time, I guess cell phones weren't around then, or were they? I guess they would have been. You're a lot younger than I.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
did somebody call immediately, and was soon after were people there?
Yeah, I called 911.
But you guys knew.
Yeah. And actually, they got there fairly quick, if I recall correctly. But dude, there were some crazy stories, Miles. Like, I won't go into all of them, but like, one of the crazy stories was when the ambulance got there. Because of how my house was set up, they couldn't, and it was kind of down in the woods, but there was like a fence, or there was a gate off the dirt road we lived on that was kind of like direct entry into the woods. So the best way to get to the helicopter with a ambulance, or with help, was through this gate. Well, there was a big chain link. There was a big chain with a big master lock on it on that fence, and it was kind of like state of emergency, because even though we felt like they were probably gone, we just sort of had hope that maybe they can be resuscitated. Maybe they're not dead, even though their bodies look really bad and bad shape. So we're like kind of like frantically running around trying to get help. Ambulance shows up, the gates. I'm like, pull down here to this gate. It's locked. We're like, well, I don't know where the key's at. And I kid you not, I never forget this either. My brother, in the moment of panic and just, all the emotions that he was feeling, he grabbed that chain and he started yanking on it, and he broke the chain in half with his bare hands, like a thick chain.
Wow.
And so stuff like that was happening. You're just like, that might have just been God breaking that chain for you, bro, because that's not normal, Later on, my brother tells me that he heard my dad's voice in the sky, like when he was sitting there yelling at dad, like, wake up, or, talk to me. That's what he kept screaming, talk to me. Like he heard dad's voice, like very audible in the air, which was, he told me that like a couple nights later, and I was just like, wow, because my brother's not like.
What he heard him say something?
He heard him say, I think he said, I love you or whatever, and I'm okay. Yeah. From the sky or from the air. And it was
Chills.
Like, yeah, it's like audible. And so just cool. I mean, there was a lot of cool things that happened around that. And it was, again, it was just a pivotal moment in my life and in my whole story. But, definitely a day that'll shake you up for sure.
Well, I appreciate you telling it. I know such detail has to be really hard to probably go back and unpack. But I've known you for a long time, and I knew your dad passed in that way, but I never knew any of that. All those details.
I remember, since you're friends with this guy, I'll tell you this story. It really meant a lot when I was just rethinking about like coming back. I came back to college, I don't know, a week later, and like I said, still really just kind of shook up, but also feeling a weird amount of peace, and it was just a lot of emotions. And trying to go to sleep and seeing that picture and that image in my head over and over, and like you don't want to close your eyes. You know what I mean? And I'll never forget this, man. Talk about a good friend. There was many times where at the time I was already friends with Kanan. We had already become buddies, but new friends, And I'd call him, it might be 2 or 3 in the morning. And at least twice he left his house and came over to my dorm room or my apartment on campus and just sat there on the floor in my room with me until I basically fell asleep. And I was just like, he would pray and we would just talk, and then he would just sit there with me until I'd fall asleep.
Oh, that makes me emotional because I love that guy.
I know, dude.
Candace Smith, who we're talking about,
He's
he's
one of the
insane.
best. So yeah, just
He
even
just
like
literally sat there with you while you went to sleep.
yeah, and more than once. So yeah, it was like also that bond that gets to happen with your friends that are really like there for you. You know what I mean? And been there for each other through life now for 20 years. But yeah, that was, just blessings like that you get to experience through the grief and the pain,
Were you did you stay home until the memorial service, or what kind of memorial service did you end up having?
Yeah. We kind of had a traditional, I guess, funeral at the church. And I stayed home. I stayed home until that happened. It probably happened pretty quick. It's a little blurry, but I think it probably a week later we had a service, and we buried him in Loganville, right close to the church. And one thing that stood out to me about that service was my dad was, for lack of a better term, he was a collector of people. And and that's what his friends would say, like, this guy just collects good people, just collects people. And just either like to love on them, he was just a collector of people. He had friends and friends and friends. And majority of his friends were Hispanic. Well, not majority, but I'd say half of his friends were Hispanic guys that either worked for him or had worked for him, or that he just loved for whatever reason. Enough to where he had already, in our church, he had already talked to, because he was starting to bring so many of his Hispanic friends to church, and they would come sit through the sermon and not understand a word of it, that my dad said, can I start a Hispanic church? And so he started it. They had this little chapel in the garden at our church. They had this little cool garden, and they called it a chapel, but it was just a nice, empty little cool building. And they started having a Hispanic church in there every Sunday where Dad would go. Dad stopped going to the service with us, and he went into make sure all that was going good, and all his Hispanic friends were being served, And so when he had his service, they had to have two services. They had English speaking service and a Hispanic service.
Oh, that's incredible.
So, because there were so many Hispanic people there and people that loved him, and I just thought, man, that's, especially at 43, to have that many friends and people that love you, that you got to have two services for the language barrier. Yes. I don't know. That was just my dad, though. Like that was just how he operated, and he didn't care who you were, where you're from. He loved you and made friends with people and served people well and took care of people.
I'm having a moment because to be as close as we've become over the years. I don't know that I ever got to know your dad. I never really knew your dad, obviously, but I haven't gotten to know your dad until now. We've talked about this before, but oddly enough, I feel like I know you. And I think what's making me emotional is there's so much of you that is your dad.
Yeah. Totally.
I mean, every single thing you described, I was like, that's Tyler, that's Tyler, that's Tyler. That's wild.
I know I'd say one of the hardest things now is that he didn't get to meet my buddies, my wife. My kids. If he saw what a tour bus looked like, he would trip out. What in the world is this? He was the guy that built a bread truck out with funks in it so we could go do hurricane work with all the Hispanic guys, and me and Dad for 4 weeks would go down to Louisiana when Katrina hit and go do tree work, out of a homemade box truck. And so to see just things like that, we're like, bro, if he could see this poor tour bus right now, he wouldn't know what to think. So yeah, it's that's the hardest part still.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know when I was slowing that story down. I didn't know why. Obviously, with my profession, I was a little careful. I was like, I want to take you back into anything super trauma related that you don't need. Thank you, buddy. That you don't need to. That may not be supportive. But I think I'm getting clear on why I wanted to have that conversation, because I think I just want to know you more. And I feel like learning about him, I feel like I know you more. So I feel like I get to know you because our kids are close. I know your kids, and and watching you got to chip off the old block there too.
Yep.
With little Luca.
Sure.
But man, Roy, what a saint.
Yeah, man. He was
Seems like such a cool guy.
He was, yeah, special guy for sure. Definitely grateful to have him in my life growing up and get to learn everything I learned. And, you know, I think he would be, I do wish he could still be here because he would
see the
he'd
success.
Get a kick out of everything, yeah.
Yeah. You ever think he's watching?
I do think he's watching. I absolutely think he's watching. And
I'm going to pull something up.
can't wait for him to get to meet you guys in heaven for sure.
You, I don't know if it's a pull up or not, but the most vulnerable I've heard until now was a song that you put out. And I have a feeling that a lot of people that may be listening to this, it's probably going to bring up a grief narrative for them. Watching two people that care about each other talk about something pretty tragic that happened, and in a very honoring, loving way. But I would imagine it might activate a lot of you. And one of the places I go to my faith. I go to my tools that I've learned in therapy, and then I go to music.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote a beautiful song. Well, I don't want to embarrass you, but could I play it?
Yeah, for sure. Miss My Daddy, you talking about?
Yeah. So I want anybody out there that's been listening to this part of the conversation to hear this. It was beautiful. I can't remember who wrote this with you.
It was just me, actually.
What?
Yeah. And I was...
Wait, set up the song.
Well, I had COVID, and when I had COVID, I was, what's the word? When you're...
Oh, we had to...
Oh, I was quarantined.
Quarantine, yeah.
Remember when that word was so popular? I almost forgot what that word was. Anyways, when we were quarantined from having COVID, I sat on my tour bus for 10 days in my driveway and didn't see my kids or family, you know, and just sat there. And I actually didn't feel terrible, like as far as being sick. I felt pretty good. So I was just like almost just wound up and antsy. So I ended up writing like 10 songs while I was on the bus those 10 days. And one of them was this Undivided song I did with Tim McGraw, and then one of them was this song.
You wrote Undivided that day too,
mm-hmm,
by yourself
that week. Yeah, just again, time to think, time to be quiet. And what I realized in those 10 days is I don't do that for myself ever. I even got off the bus and thought once a year I should sit on this bus for a week and just be with my thoughts.
By yourself.
By myself, be with my thoughts. Because the truth is, that's the whole reason that song ever got written, because I was just, my friend Leslie had just lost her dad, and I was kind of grieving for her. And it was bringing back a lot of emotions that I typically would have been able to bury with friends or busyness or the kids running around the house or whatever, but I was by myself with my thoughts. And that's a powerful place to be when you're alone and you're with your thoughts and you're able to process and you're able to not rush through them, you know? So that's where one night I just sat down and was just sort of like a therapy session, you know, just trying to get it out.
I want to pause here for a moment, and I would implore you to go listen to this song, Miss My Daddy by Tyler Hubbard. You can find it anywhere where you might stream music. Unfortunately, we couldn't put that piece into the episode because of the timeline. We weren't able to get the licensing and the publishing done in the timeline that we wanted to release this episode so you guys could get a chance to hear it. But often at Onsite and some of my other work, we use music therapeutically a lot, especially on the back end of really moving and meaningful conversations, which was a real moment that we had there as friends. And that song kind of came in and bookmarked it beautifully. What happened there was I pushed play on it, and we got to listen to it together, and it was awesome. And so unfortunately I can't show you that part now. Maybe at some point we'll add it back to the episode, but I really would encourage you to pause the episode for a minute here, listen to the song, and then as soon as you finish up, hit play again, and we're going to jump back right into our conversation.
Hadn't heard that one in a while.
I remember when you sent it to me when it was rough, just when you just put the vocals down, and I was slayed then.
Yeah, man.
I think father-son type stories or child stories hit deeper when you become a parent sometimes too, because all I could think about is our
kids are going to be saying some of that stuff about us one
So
day.
true.
And it honestly makes me want to tell them more about their grandfather, because he's not going to. That generation doesn't.
Right.
You either pick up on it or you don't. And at his age, my dad's age, with where my kids are, there's so many stories I have about him, and I'm fortunate to still have him. But I haven't made an effort to really properly introduce him to my kids and say, let me tell you about who my dad was. I thought I'm going to go do that today.
Ooh. Be good. Oh, man.
Gracious. All right. Whew, that was beautiful.
You want to talk about fried chicken or something here in a minute? Or?
I was kind of stuck too. I was like, where do we go from here?
Oh, it's good though. It feels good.
Yeah, it does. Well, I would like to see where we go. So you also described some that you had this odd peace in faith, which hearing a little bit more about him, I kind of understand why. But you go back to school, and tell me where you go from there. Is this where the music starts to kick back in?
Not even really. I mean, I was a sophomore in college. I would say maybe my junior year, I kind of sort of picked up my guitar again and just casually sort of wrote some stuff on my own in my bedroom. Not, I wasn't playing anything or doing anything until probably my senior year. Because then at that point, I knew. Well, let me back up a minute. When I made the decision to go back to college, it was because I knew that's what Dad would have wanted me to do. I really thought about it. I'm like, would Dad be proud of me to stay home and take care of his business and take care of Mom and my sister? Probably. But would he have wanted me to do that? No. He would have wanted me to go back to college, finish what I started, and see what it's out there for me, and in the meantime, do my best to take care of Mom and my family. But so anyways, back to school, kind of back to the regular again, trying to process back at it, kind of surrounded with friends and social and this and that. And so I think the first year back, I was just like, all right, let me just. And everybody also expected, because it hit my school hard too. Like all my friends, dude, like it was a big deal. They had a whole service, like when I was not even there, praying for me and my family, like a whole thing. Like it was so everyone heard about it. It was big news at my school. And I think everyone expected me to just be a train wreck when I came back. And like I said, by the grace of God, I had so much peace, and I was. Obviously, grief and pain was there, but that joy that I had was unexplainable. And I think that was an opportunity where God was just showing out, and being like, look, we can go through hard things and I got you. You know what I mean? And you're seeing it in real time, and you're feeling it in real time, and your friends are feeling it in real time. And so it was a powerful season for sure, especially for spiritual growth. So yeah, things were fairly just sort of normal in college until as far as that goes, just kind of the normal, doing what I was doing. And then I would say senior year, I really decided, like at some point along the way, I had heard that, man, you can write songs for a living. Like that can be like there's songwriters that do this professionally. You don't have to, writing songs doesn't have to be a means to an end or just to support you as an artist. If you're an artist, like you can write songs. So I decided that's what I want to do. Like I want to pursue. When I get out of school, I'm pursuing a publishing deal. Like that's what I want to that's going to be my direction. And so I started writing some more songs my senior year. Like I said, maybe my junior year, picked up my guitar, started kind of just writing some stuff. Maybe it was probably a lot of therapeutic for me, And then connected with BK and genuinely felt the Holy Spirit. At this time, you got to understand too, like I was really in tune with the Holy Spirit. Like we were just walking step in step because of what I'd been through and how hard I was having to lean on that for my peace and my joy and everything, and to just wake up. Survival. Yeah. And so, I was at this I had known of BK just through, hanging with the athletes and the baseball team and stuff. And I knew he kind of dabbled with music and played his guitar, and there was an on-campus worship event just a small gathering, and BK was leading worship, and I ended up going to it, and I was in the back, and I just remember like during that event, I remember God saying, like, telling me very, very directly, you need to go meet that guy and you need to do music with that guy. And so I went up to him afterwards. Hey, bro, I know you a little bit. I'm Tyler, you know, hey, I'm BK, you know, yeah, I got a class with your friend, and he's actually been saying we should get together and this and that. And I said, well, why don't we just get together and write a song, you know? So we ended up hooking up and wrote a couple songs on the back of my tailgate of my truck in the parking lot. I'll never forget. And then we
sounds like a country song, right?
It honestly felt like a country song. We're just hanging out, getting to know each other, and wrote a song or two. And then at the time I was starting to really trying to get out there a little bit and start to play writers rounds when I could, just to, because, you know, I was like, yeah, how do you get your songs heard if you don't have a pub deal? Well, you go play them, you know. Well, how do you get a pub deal? Yeah, you got to get them heard. So I need to get out and start playing writers rounds. So I was trying to get more comfortable doing that. I had actually been nominated to play at the Songwriter Showcase at Belmont, which was kind of a big deal at the time. And wow, like getting acknowledged as a songwriter and make, you know. So I played this, and that was cool. And BK was actually at that thing, and he came up to me afterwards. Maybe that was when we decided, yo, it's like, because I came up to him, introduced, but then he came up to me and was like, bro, we got to do something. Like, let's write, you know. So we start write a few songs. In the meantime, I'm playing some different writers rounds. He's probably playing some different things because his baseball career's coming to an end, and he's probably figuring out what he wants to do and starting to write songs. And eventually we would be on a few I'd call him, hey bro, let's do this writers round. There's two more guys, and I'll, you know, you play your songs, I'll play my songs, and they can do theirs. And we obviously had no hits at the time. We were just playing our songs that we had written. And eventually I started hearing all BK stuff and kind of like singing on it. He started hearing all my stuff and singing on it. And then we would start playing a lot of the songs that we wrote together and singing them together. And that, you know, that went on for a few months. And then we eventually had enough songs where we would put together a round and not need to bring two more guys. You know, we would just say, well, bro, we got like 12 songs. Like, let's just do it ourselves. So then we'd sit up there on a stool and go back and forth, usually at a place like Hotel Indigo on West End.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. When they did rounds.
That was like we cut our teeth there. We also we started playing some like full band stuff here and there, but this was a little later. Honestly, we cut our teeth sitting on stools playing writers rounds. And then on Wednesday nights, this is a fun little thing.
At that point, were you singing your songs individually, or had you started doing a few together?
At this point, we had started doing a couple together. Just kind of casually, like, hey, let's play them that song we wrote last week, and I'll sing it with you, you know. But
any of those early songs get cut later?
Not on a large scale. No, it was just like on our little EP that we made, our first little EP. But yeah, so it, you know, the story goes on slowly but surely. We start playing them by ourselves. Then we decide, let's pull the stools out, bro, and let's stand up. Like, at that time, like 40 of our friends were showing up at Hotel Indigo to watch us play. And so we were like, man, this is cool. And we had by this time, we had probably graduated. We moved into the same house together in Green Hills. Him and I, Chase Rice, Tom Beaupre, and Justin Marusik. We all lived in this same house.
What a crew.
We called it the Fun House. It was awesome. We had a blast. And at the time, we were all kind of pursuing the same thing. You know, Chase had moved into town off of doing what he was doing on Survivor and NASCAR and this and that. And then
he played college ball too, didn't he?
He played college ball as well.
I forgot about the Survivor.
He was like, man, I want to be a songwriter too. So, and me and BK had been pursuing it for a while. And we were like, bro, and he was our roommate. So we kind of learned to play guitar and write songs together with Chase Rice too, you know. And but BK and I eventually we're all hanging out at the Fun House one night after these Hotel Indigo nights, and one of our friends was like, man, you guys need a name. I think it was either Mary Ann Keene or Jordan, who were two of our close girlfriends at the time, that were they were into what we were doing, and they were almost acting as like young managers, you know, like, guys, we need to, because at the time BK and I were starting to call clubs in the Southeast and act like we were agents, and we had this band that they had to book.
Booking yourself.
Yeah, booking ourselves. And on the weekends, I'd unload all my car wash and stuff, and we would take his Tahoe and my enclosed trailer, and we'd put guitars and gear in there, and we would just go, and we'd take Tom, who was living with us, and played bass, and Justin would play drums, and we would go play these clubs in the Southeast.
You were still washing cars on the side?
Washing cars during the week, yeah, because at this point, no pub deal or nothing. And eventually, I don't know, a year or so in, we ended up meeting Seth England which was a huge blessing. He took us into Big Loud, introduced us to Craig and everybody, and Rodney and Tompkins. And Craig was really interested in signing us, and he just connected with us right off the bat. And at this time, I mean, it was Craig Wiseman, bro. Like, you know, he was one of my heroes.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just blessed to be in that building. And then he signed us. And I'll never forget, Seth said, well, how much are your bills? What do you need to make every month to pay your bills? And I said, $1,500. That covers everything. And so he said, all right, well, you're going to get $1,500 a month. You're going to be a professional songwriter. And I thought, man, that's great. I don't have to wash cars anymore. It was so nice because for so long I was just juggling, trying to make money and pay the bills while I was trying to juggle a career and build a songwriting career. So that was a huge moment to be like, man, I don't have to worry about my bills anymore. And I don't have to worry about what car I'm going to wash next week, So that was huge. And me and BK both got a publishing deal with Big Loud. So at that point, we could actively, literally 5 days a week, we could write songs. And then on the weekends, we could get in my trailer in his Tahoe, and we could go play these little shows. And yeah, one night after Indigo, one of Jordan or Marianne said, you guys need to come up with a name, because you guys are like doing something. It's kind of cool. And so I said, well, man, basically let's come up with a name that represents both of us and who we are and where we're from, And so that night we said, well, Florida Georgia line, that's where we meet in the middle. Let's just do that. Mm-hmm. And it kind of stuck. And next thing you know, we're playing these shows and that we had booked in the Southeast, and they were starting to get a little buzz around town. And I had told BK, I'm like, bro, listen, man, you and I, if we just keep grinding and we hit this pavement and we're out here building a fan base, I was like, we don't need nobody else, bro. We got this. Like, we're not going to we're not taking a record deal meeting. We're not going up and down Music Row. We're not doing this because we got songwriting, bro. Our bills are covered. This is a cherry on top. We get to tour on the weekend. We're not making any money, but we will. But if we go out there and build a fan base, the labels will come to us. I said, I promise you. Just watch. And sure enough, dude, we busted our tails for 3 years just doing that and just building and building and building in a van and we started in his Tahoe. Then we ended up buying a 12-passenger van, and that felt great, big upgrade. And then eventually we bought a Sprinter van, which was a big upgrade because it had a few bunks in it. Because when we were in the van, we were driving overnight. We were on certain tours where we were the only band in a van. Big tours like the Country Throwdown Tour. Heck of a summer. We were the barbecue band, had to cook for everybody on the whole tour. Literally everybody and their whole crew, all the acts, all the crew. Had to put the fire out, drive overnight to the next place and follow the tour and do it all over again, play our set in the middle of the afternoon, and then go to the grocery store, get groceries, and cook for the whole crew for the next 8 hours. I mean, it was intense, bro. We were doing what nobody else would do, and now nobody else would do that for sure. It seems like this culture now they're so far from building it the way we built it. And there's nothing wrong with...
Was Seth managing you at the time or not yet?
At the time, yes. Yeah, basically.
So he started managing you shortly after.
Basically, he went from our publisher to, well, I'll help manage you guys, And
Were you
he
Seth's
fell into
first
management.
act?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, he fell into management because we needed managed, and we fell into having a manager because Seth was down to do it, and he was great, and he's a song guy, and we didn't know any different. We never took a management meeting.
Seth England's who we're talking about. He's
now
a legendary manager. Morgan Wallen.
Now he doesn't even manage anymore because he's too busy doing even bigger things. He's
Star has a label. All of it. Great guy.
But yeah, to have him in our corner, we were all figuring it out together. You know what I mean? And at the time, it was beautiful because the stars aligned. You know what I mean? And granted, it wasn't overnight. I mean, a lot of people think our story started in 2012. It really started in 2009. But we have that story of building it grassroots from the ground up, and really going out there and signing every autograph and, standing in autograph lines for 3 hours, 4 hours in the middle of the afternoon after we play. And I mean, it was just that thing. We were just shake a hand, make a fan. That was our thing. You know what I mean? And play every song like it's the last song you ever play. And so
kind of fits your dad, Roy's advice with.
Honestly, yeah, it does. Get to know
remember everybody's name.
Yeah, shake a hand, make a fan, and we shook a lot of hands and made a lot of fans, and then 2012. Actually, Cruise had dropped at that point when we were on the Country Throwdown tour that summer. So that must.
You were still in a Sprinter van when Cruise dropped.
Yeah.
Wow.
15 passenger van. Yeah. And then we moved to the Sprinter, which had a couple bunks in the back, which was huge because we could at least rotate drivers and sleep and this and that. But yeah, man, I mean, it was a heck of a journey. I mean, that's the start of the rocket ship.
I don't remember the trajectory of cruise, but did it go as fast as?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a massive.
Technically, we had cruise out before we had signed any deal. So like, once cruise was out and it hit the rocket, it did, and we were getting that momentum and building this fan base. And I mean, it was like the stars aligned. You know what I mean? It was the perfect time, perfect sound. Me and BK were in perfect sync with where we were at in life, and it was just the perfect storm. And I know it even more now than I did then, obviously, because I was just found myself on this rocket ship that I didn't know how to handle, but I didn't even know that it was, at the time, I didn't even know how special it was, or, you know, the challenges that were ahead or what this looks like. Although I will say this about me, even when I go back and talk about my decision to really lean into Jesus after my dad passed, something in my childhood and my narrative had told me stories, and you hear these nightmare stories of how this happens, whether it's someone has a dramatic, tragic loss. Well, they've fallen off into alcoholism or pain pills or whatever, and they're really struggling. And you hear all this, you know, basically the worst case scenarios of a lot of situations. And when I found myself in these certain situations, I would say, well, I know where this can lead to. I don't want to go down that road. I'm going to be intentional not to. So even with the beginning of our success, I knew, like, this is incredible, but man, I hear all the stories about what happens next, you know, like with this success, and, you know, fame was starting to happen. Money was starting to happen, not big money, but just more money than I'd ever thought about having, you know? And I just started thinking, okay, what can I control? I can control I can try to control how I handle and approach this season of my life. And what I don't want to be is another stat. Like, I do not want to be the rock star that turns into the alcoholic, that turns into the, you know, living on the road, no home life, domestic, you know, all the things you hear about that can be very common. It's a tale as old as time, you know. It just seems like, yeah, you hear it, you see all the documentaries and all this. And I said, that's why I was scared to death of labels. I was like, labels, bro, no way. Labels, all they're going to do is take and hurt, and they don't care about us. They don't buy, they want the money. And it was just this kind of like bad taste in my mouth from just history and stories and stuff. So I was very kind of like turned off, and it really served me well when it came to like navigating and signing a deal and all that. But even now that I'm older, and through the journey of FGL, like, I was determined. Like, granted, we had plenty of time to sow our wild oats and get it out of our system and drink as much as we could handle, or more than we could handle, hang out with.
You tried on the lifestyle.
Yeah, I tried it on for a second, and I'm like, okay, I get it. This is what it is. It's not fulfilling. It's not cool. It's actually what they say. But I wanted to experience it for myself, and I recommend everyone doing that, to be honest. Because you can hear one thing, but until you experience it, there might be curiosity down the road. So I was fortunate.
When you say it's not what they say, what was the outcome?
Fulfilling. It wasn't
lonely, or
it was lonely. It was very temporarily satisfying. You know what I mean? Once that buzz wore off, bro, the hangover was terrible. Or once you sobered up, that girl was actually very annoying and not cool, or like whatever. You're just like, this is not gonna, like, I don't want this life. You know what I mean? And fun for a minute. We tell stories where all the guys are on one tour bus. We're having a good time. It is what it is. But ultimately, I was really blessed and fortunate. And I feel like Jesus was protecting me as well through all those years to not have any terrible consequences of our irresponsibility or kind of like childish actions. But at the same time, it was short-lived. You know, it was a couple of years of probably just 1 or 2 years before I felt like, man, I've tasted it. I get it. This isn't for me. And one day I want to have a balanced life. I want to have a family. I want to have a great wife. I want to have kids. I want to have a home and something to come home to when I get off the road, you know, and success was starting to happen for us, where I could tell things were shifting with who was hanging around and like why they were hanging around. And it wasn't just because they liked me in BK. It was becoming more like, oh, these guys are successful and they got money, and all these people girls that typically wouldn't want to hang out are like all of a sudden want to hang out all the time. I'm just like, no, this is kind of scary, because like, what's their motive, And like, am I ever going to actually find someone that doesn't care about the music and the success and riding the FGL rocket with me, and it can actually be about me? So those fears started to set in. And around that time is when I met Hayley. And I wasn't really looking truly for like my wife, but I was starting to have those thoughts of like, man, like this lifestyle can get old quick. I kind of want some stability. I want to be in love with somebody that supports me and loves me for me. And I don't want to be just out here the music's great, but that's not where the fulfillment's going to come from. You know what I mean? And ultimately I did have a really strong foundation of faith, which allowed me to, even in my wildest years, have a foundation. I knew where home was. You know what I mean? I knew where my strength and my courage and my joy and everything comes from. So that was a gift along the way. But yeah, navigating those years, especially on the personal side, and then realizing, and then getting blessed enough to meet someone like Hayley.
Yeah, you met a saint.
And then really just saying, okay, like, she's my partner in life, and we're going to do this together. And she
You knew right away?
I knew pretty quickly, to be honest. And we were friends for a while before we ever moved to the next before we ever kissed or there was none of that. It was like we were really good friends. And when we first started kind of dating, it ended up just like one night at one of our friends' house. A bunch of friends were together. We were having a wine and cigar night, and I'll never forget, I had quite a bit of wine, decided I'm not driving home. So I slept on the couch at my friend's house, and Hayley ended up staying there as well. She was going to stay in this girl's roommate's room, but that girl told the roommate that night that she didn't want anybody sleeping in her room. And so Hayley ended up not having a spot to crash. So we ended up crashing out together on her couch. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I got room on this couch if you want to come sleep over here. And honestly, we passed out that night and woke up the next morning. And I just remember like holding her, and I was just like, whoa, this feels really good. Like, you want to hang out tomorrow? You know what I mean? Like, maybe this is more than friends, And from that night on, we actually kissed that night, and from that moment on, it was like I was hooked. I knew she was the one. Enough to even joke around with. I remember being in the bus joking around with our bass player Tom and getting down on one knee, acting like I was gonna ask her to marry me, and she didn't know I was doing that, and she saw me in the back lounge goofing around with Tom, and she kind of asked me later, what were you doing back there? I was like, oh, nothing. But I was like telling Tom, like, I'm gonna marry this girl, dude, for sure. And so anyways, yeah, it was special, and she's been just an incredible person to do life with, and so supportive and so gracious, and yeah, so now, like, I'm, music back then was priority number one. I mean, it just was. I mean, I can say God was first, but truthfully, music was first. My career, my drive, my desire to crush it and continue was first, priority list. And now in my life is truly fourth. It's God, my wife, my kids, and then music, and my career. And so the dynamics shifted, and it's the new challenge is now balancing all those things and making sure the priorities stay in line and making sure my team understand my priorities and all those things. But yeah, it came at the perfect time, and I couldn't have asked for a better, for God to put someone better in my life than Hayley. So
it's sentimental for me to hear that story, because you were kind to invite me and Judah out. Just celebrated a 10-year vow renewal
10 years.
In Idaho, and we both got to be a little part of that, and it was just incredible. It's a great love story you've been living. About that 10 years, because there's so many things we could talk about. You could literally camp out and talk about that 10 years, because y'all started breaking the glass ceiling. Mm-hmm. Every record that had ever been made, FGL was just breaking it. And you were breaking it in such an untraditional way that you were the first to usher in a whole new sound to country music in a way. And that was not that wildly received by the industry. And I'm curious, I know at that time, the rebel side of you and the pushback on authority side to you and the kind of autonomy and independent side of you was certainly leading. And I think I agree it served you, because you can't argue with the track record. Any regrets in that season?
Yes and no, to be honest, because there was something about our rebellious spirit that got us where we were and gave us that drive. And we were polarizing when we came out. I didn't know that. Honestly, we were so busy on the road and doing what we loved and making music, we didn't even know until probably way later on that we were a polarizing band, and that people in this town and in this industry either were bought in or did not like us. And to be truthful, I didn't really care at that age, because we got it made, bro. We're out here crushing these shows. We're doing our thing. We don't, we don't need to worry about what Music Row's saying or thinking. Like, let's just do us. We're going to have fun. We're going to write what we know, and we're going to do our thing. And people eventually get to know us, maybe. But again, it wasn't a priority. It was just like, and I didn't have time to, we were siloed off on the road doing our thing and really focused and really super busy. Like, when I say busy, like 230 shows a year for a couple years. So there was no being in town and building relationships and being, and telling our story and being hands-on with the team. And it was just, we didn't buy into the, we were a little bit anti-industry before that was like a thing. Well, not before it was a thing. It's always been a thing, but we kind of rode that wave, and I do think it served us well. But I do, and when I say that there are some, I would say regrets would be, it's a bit unfortunate now that, and it's also an opportunity, and I'm excited about it. But over the years, I've realized, man, a lot of people in this town, they know me based on what they created in their mind about me in 2012. When we came out and we were really polarizing and we were really, doing it our way and a bit rebellious and a bit, we were just labeled as the party guys, and they do it well, and let's go to an FGL show. These guys they're buddies and they party. And that was it. And that's all we cared if they knew. They didn't need to know the depth of our heart or the struggles or they didn't need to know that. And we just kept it fun. And that's the life, that's the season that we were in. And so yeah, now it's interesting because, like we've talked about, it just feels like never really let anyone in or given anyone an opportunity to create a narrative around who I am that's true or authentic. It's all kind of based on what the town says or what people's narratives in their head have made up or what they've thought about FGL. And honestly, a lot of that's probably true, and I should say was probably true, 15 years ago. But from the age of 23 to 38, you change a lot. 24 to 38, a lot's changed, and I do now feel the desire and hunger to, man, I want people to know me, man. I want to be known. I don't want to be, and I don't mean famous. I mean, I want to be known for who I am. I want to be known for, making an impact and a positive impact in the world. I don't want to just be known for what I did with BK in 2012 and 13 and 14. It's like, so there are days where I'm like, man, could have done a better job for sure around that. But at the time, just didn't see a need to, and felt like, man, we got this, we're rocking, And I've been reminded in this new season, it's like, man, what we had and what we did, is so rare. And back then I just thought, man, this is easy. I can't believe it's this easy. You just put a song out and it blows up, and people are showing up like crazy. Like, what's so hard about this business? I mean, and I couldn't have been more wrong, and now I'm able to see it for what it is. And it was a gift. It really was a gift that God gave us. And we made the most of it. But now I feel like my gift is, I'm still being given a gift that God gave me, and now I want to move the success into the significant category, and instead of just all focused on success, and I feel like that's so that's kind of where my headspace is now. And some of that making an impact, it means going back and rebuilding some of these relationships, making sure, being myself and taking the time to get to know the town, and taking the time for the town to get to know me, and the fan base. So that's kind of, yeah, that's a long-winded answer, but
no, it's a great answer. I'm glad to hear it, because I know I I watched it, I was tied to the industry, but also just a fan of the music, of country music in general. So I watched how polarizing it was, especially when you brought, what made you bring Nelly to the table?
Well, we were label mates, and our label had proposed the idea of, man, you guys should do a
Wait, Nelly's was with Scott?
With Universal. No.
That's right. You started with Universal.
Big picture. It was like a sister, label. But anyways, we were connected through the label, and they had brought the idea, and then they had mentioned, what about Nelly? And I thought, man, that'd be, what? I love Nelly. Like, that'd be incredible. And so I think it was just a few days later, me and BK were on the road, and we get a rough in our inbox, and we're like, yo, did you hear what Nelly did on this song? And he just went in the studio and put his verse on it, and kind of, and it was great. And then we got back in with Joey and kind of did a remix on the production a bit and sauced it up a little bit more. And
did Joey Moe,
Joey Moe.
He do all those early records?
Yep, he did our first 4 albums.
So talented. Such a good dude.
Yeah, just a great experience for us as well. But yeah, and then the relationship with Nelly just grew from there. I mean, we ended up meeting, playing some shows, and next thing you know, like, we're calling him Uncle Mo. Like, he's literally giving us advice on, in a way that only Nelly can. Just a passionate advisory board, basically, is what Nelly was for us for a while. But he was like our cousin or our uncle, and just really connected, hit it off, and played tons of shows together, went on tour together, award shows, this and that. And really, that relationship's been incredible ever since. We just really look up to him and his whole crew. And so it was a perfect collaborator to take that song to the next level and then build, when it works that great, it's just fun to see what it can build into, and relationships and tours. And
it was such a, because I think I mentioned, where were we? We were in Jacksonville maybe. And it was after the tragedy in Vegas, I think, because I don't know if you remember that particular show, but yeah, we were touring with Nelly.
Yeah.
He was actually opening up for y'all at the time, I think.
Yeah, it was like Nelly and Backstreet Boys and us.
They were opening up.
Yeah,
that tour alone, that ticket in country music, a headliner as a country music duo, and Backstreet Boys and Nelly. But we were
literally, it was like it felt like my childhood. You know what I mean? We're like, we're taking it back here.
But it was so unheard of. I mean, it was such an interesting package. That night, somebody turned on or pulled a fire alarm. I don't know if you remember that, because I was standing in front of house, actually randomly by BK's parents, and that was literally fresh after.
Right.
I think it was after.
It was like our first or second show after that happened.
And everybody in the arena panicked.
Yeah.
I mean, not like run panic, but everybody for a moment froze.
Right.
And it got dead quiet. And I remember, who's your security at the time? I worked out with him for years. Wilson. Yeah, Wilson. Love that guy. Yeah. I think he was the first one up there, but I think he ran and got you guys off stage. Yeah. And then suddenly everybody else was like, we got to get out of the building.
Right.
So I remember I just jumped in and took his parents. We walked outside. But I remember we got on the tour bus after that, because that was when you just started doing the pub thing and writing on the road. And that was a pretty innovative piece too as a publisher. But I remember sitting there thinking, I didn't know it was closer. I mean, Hardy was on the bus. Mm-hmm. That was when he had just written that Up Down with you guys that y'all cut with Morgan.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing such the eclectic group of people on that bus. And I was like, "What? This is something you just don't get to see." Backstreet Boys and Nelly and rock artists and country artists. You guys created something incredibly special that disrupted the town in a beautiful way. And it did exactly what Roy invited you to do at Belmont, which is just get to know everybody.
Yeah.
And I saw you push through the stereotypes, pull everybody together in a cool way, and create something that's unforgettable. And then to see you put your head down after all of that, and you guys have gone separate ways and creating your own music in different ways, and turn into a solo act and come out of the gate with 4 number 1 hits.
Yeah, man.
Do you ever sit and think about that?
Yes, from time to time I do.
You had slowed down long enough to
not much, but I do from time to time.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty wild, and I've learned a lot about myself through that process too. I've obviously, one thing I've always known is it takes a great team, and it's not just me. It's my songwriters, it's the label, it's all the people fighting on my behalf, and I feel really fortunate to even be doing it, especially after COVID. Like, there was a time where I thought, man, we might be done. Like, I might be done being an artist or like playing shows. I guess I'll just be a stay-at-home songwriter, which also sounded really great at the time. And half the time I'm really jealous of my songwriting buddies that get to work 11 to 4 and go home to their family, and that's the normal day. But so I was living that world for a while, and I thought, man, like FGL might, like my time as a country music artist might be coming to an end. As crazy as that was, because we went from playing 3-4 shows a week for 10 years to overnight, well, we can't play shows anymore because of COVID. And you're just like,
and you were at a peak or a prime.
We were at a pretty
prime.
We were,
because I think it's one of the bigger Live Nation tours that ever been put
yeah,
together.
exactly.
Massive.
We were at our peak, I would say. And, there were signs that were saying our trajectory was starting. I mean, there were some struggles here and there, like ticket sales a little bit here and there, but that was all like post-pandemic and stuff. We're trying to get back on our feet a little bit and figure out what this looks like. But there for a time, just like a lot of people probably went through, of like, man, there's so many unknowns. Like, I don't know what my future holds. I don't know if I'm ever going to be on stage again. I don't know what this looks like. I thought we were just going to do this forever. I just took it for granted. I just thought, yeah, well, we built something great. We'll be able to just ride off into the sunset. This will be awesome. We'll carry this thing out for another 10 years and call it a day. You know what I mean? But that plan, obviously, that's not what God had in mind, and I feel like through the pandemic, and then reassessing, and now coming out on the other side and really having like more gratitude than ever for getting to do what I love, which is write songs and play shows. And tour. I mean, I love travel. I love touring. I love playing shows. Now that I'm out there getting to do it again, even in a way different capacity, I am thoroughly in love with what I do, and the passion is probably more than ever, and the drive. I've also learned that I'm built for a challenge. Like, I love a challenge. I love doing what people say can't be done, or at least trying to. Way more than I love doing what people think I should do or what would be easy. Would it be easy to just get back with FGL and try to build? Yeah, it'd probably be easier than building my own thing, but I like the challenge. You know what I mean? And I'm feeling so much creative freedom and so much excitement, so much joy, and getting to do this with a different dynamic without a partner. To be honest, the freedom, the creativity that comes with that. I never expected it. I never expected to ever be doing this by myself, So to be here, it's just funny how life works, Like, you might think one thing and you look up and you're in a completely different scenario and situation, or going through something you never expected. And that's what that was for me. And so, as tough as it was, I'm also really grateful and super grateful to be where I'm at now, and in the headspace I'm at, and to be able to have the opportunity to still do what I love, and yeah, if more number ones come, that's great. But ultimately I'm just, I'm at a season of life where, I think balance and all that comes before trying to just blow the roof off with success. I love getting to just be a songwriter and an artist and play my shows for the people that show up, and go home to my family and love on those kids. And yeah, man, it's just a fun season, and I'm grateful.
When you look back now, what stands out most about that season when FGL was coming to an end?
Good question. I think it was a lot of emotion, a lot of confusion, a lot of unknown, partially based on where we were as a world in the middle of a pandemic, and I'd kind of touched on what it kind of felt like to go from playing 3 or 4 shows a week for 10 years of my life, with someone that I considered a really close, dear friend, to not doing anything, right? I mean, all of our worlds closed down, especially in the entertainment business. And so that alone was confusing and created a lot of unknown, a lot of fear, a lot of like, wow, this is overnight and we're done. Like, how does this,
And remind me of that specific timeline, because I'm confusing that.
Well, that was when I remember it was 2020, when the pandemic, and I think it was March when we all I remember we came back from a trip to Africa, and the world as we knew it in the States was completely different. And I even had friends calling me when we were in Africa being like, you guys should get home. Like, this is a big deal. Like, things are changing. Like, you guys literally might get stuck in Africa. And sure enough, we got on our flight to come home, the same flight that we were supposed to be on. and there was a lot of chaos going on in the airport, and we learned that was the very last flight out of Johannesburg before they were shutting the airport down. So we were already on the flight, but we're like, what's going on? Why is everybody, panicking and all this, and why is everyone like trying to make decisions? And they said, well, this is the last flight. So I came back home to a world that was completely different than when we left, and at first I was like, this is cool. Like, I kind of thrive in this sort of like, oh, there's a little bit of a uneasy thing going. There's some unknowns happening. We don't know what's happening. But then after, and I was also like, well, I'll just enjoy kind of being home, being with the family. Again, this is also new for me to not be just in straight work mode, that I was able to enjoy the first few months of it. And then, yeah, you really realize like, wow, like our world, like this isn't going to come back next week. You know what I mean? Like, I think at the beginning we all thought, well, this will be short lived and we'll just enjoy it. And, and then it wasn't the case, and we're like sitting there thinking, man, like when the fear really does set in where you're like, is everything that I've worked for about to just be gone? You know what I mean? Am I really just going to not be able to play shows for the foreseeable future? And at that point, like, playing shows was not only part of what I love to do, but it was my livelihood. It was how we paid the bills, and all those things. And so,
had a lot of people employed,
a lot of people, yeah, a lot of families.
And at this point, that was the separation was not looming yet, or was
no, not really, no.
Okay, it was so you're referring more to like the pandemic.
This
was
is
your
like
first
pandemic.
big response.
Yeah, I was exactly. It kind of came in waves, right? So yeah, the pandemic hits. We're all kind of like, whoa. But as far as FGL was concerned, everything was good. Everything was normal. We had just in 2019 had a big tour with Dan and Shay and Morgan Wallen, and everything was. We were just about to put out our 5th album, which was our last album on our record deal. So we were able to.
That's kind of crazy to think Morgan was opening for you guys.
In 2019, yeah, first of 3. He was before Dan and Shay. Wow. And so great tour though, great experience. And then our 5th album was about to be released, and we were coming to a close of our record deal. That was like our 5th and final album on our deal. So there was just a lot of moving parts, but as far as we were concerned as a band, we were good. There was really none of this conversation had bubbled up at all, and we were kind of like, in my opinion, we're like about to get ready to suss out the pandemic and then re-sign a new deal and, have more ownership of our music and all those things that come with signing a second deal. And so yeah, man, I mean, I felt pretty stable as you could feel at that time, although everything was up in the air. But I just thought, well, when we all get back to it, like, we'll get back to it, And so I'll never forget. It was an interesting season for me, and you've probably heard me. I mean, people may or may not know this about me, but yeah, I do feel like the fall of 2020 is when my world fell apart, as if it weren't already kind of falling apart, but everything started to stack up on top of each other. And we had 2 kids that were 1 and 2 years old. We had our 3rd child in September of 2020. I was in the middle of the biggest injury I've ever dealt with, which was I ruptured my Achilles and broke my ankle 3 weeks before we had our 3rd child.
About that.
Yeah.
Dirt bike.
So yeah, just dirt. Yeah. Overjumped something on my dirt bike. My ankle folded up, and anyways, was a major orthopedic injury that required tons and tons of recovery. And I didn't know what I had gotten. I thought, well, I'll be back. I'm gonna crush this PT, and I'll be Aaron Rodgers in no time, And that was not the case. So I was third baby came. I was unable to walk or do anything or be any help around the house, so my wife had to handle 3 babies and a crippled husband. So basically 4 kids, in the house that she was taking care of. And it was just a tough season. And right before or the day after we came home with Atlas, more news was broken to me. BK sent me a song and casually over text and said, hey, what do you think about this tune? I was like, I think this is a cool tune, man. Like, I'll never forget. I said, I feel like it'd be a great Chesney pitch. You ought to send it to Chesney and see if he'd bite on it, And he said, well, I did actually send it to Chesney. And he passed on it, which I'm taking as a sign. And I said, well, what sign for what? And he said, well, that I should do it. And at that point, that was I'm like, what do you mean? Like we should do it? Or like, what do you mean? He's like, no, man, I think that was essentially the beginning of the conversation of, no, I've been writing a bunch of songs at home during the pandemic in Florida by myself. And I really want to like pursue the solo thing. And I was like really taken back a bit. Like, why? Like, we're in a great spot. Like, we're about to sign our next deal. We're about to drop our 5th album. Like, everything's rocking. We're in the middle of the pandemic. So like, we don't need to be making any major decisions right now anyways. Like, we're sort of in limbo, and we're all emotionally charged and everything's happening. And I'm just like, why don't we just wait like 5 years? Like, let's just ride this thing.
Was it the first time you'd heard about it, or had he expressed some interest?
Well, there was a time, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago where there was interest expressed of like from BK, basically being like, yeah, one day I'd like to try the solo thing. And I'm like, basically, well, that sounds great one day, but right now we're in the middle of a record deal, and I understand the desire.
The record deal would contractually.
Yeah, contractually, you weren't allowed to go do that, okay. Right?
But the record deal had ended, and so
I think for him that was the time.
It was an opportunity.
Yeah, an opportunity.
Yeah.
So it had been mentioned once or twice over the years that him and I had been through that topic. It wasn't completely foreign to me. He had mentioned it, but it was very brief. There was not long conversations around it, and it was kind of a day or two of those conversations, and then very quickly he would be like, no, bro, like I'm all in on FGL. Like, that time will come, but like I'm okay to not pursue that. And but again, in my mind, I just thought, yeah, that'll be like what we do a couple decades from now.
Once you
know what I mean?
Because at this point, the tour was definitely still going this way.
Yeah, I'd say the first time any of those conversations ever got brought up was probably like 2015, 16.
Okay.
So yeah, we were still, that was like almost the peak. All that to say, I was taken way back, but I wasn't like it wasn't like a foreign topic completely. You know what I'm saying? But I guess I just thought, wow, with where we're sitting in the context of history right now, like this would be a terrible time to or not the right time in my opinion to go do this. But
in your mind, the timing, because I guess there's an arc in every artist's career. So it's super predictable. There's a few outliers, but for the most part, it's like it ideally goes up at some point and gives you a J curve, and then it's gonna flatten inevitably, right. and then the legacy play. And for people that have had y'all's kind of success, the legacy plays even more than a lot of people were ever achieved. But were you thinking, if we're going to do that, let's at least ride out the momentum?
Well, that's what I told BK. I'm like, bro, let's ride this thing out for 5 more years or 10 more years. And then if we want to go rogue and go do whatever we want to do, let's do that. But like, like it's still fairly early in our career, like in the big picture. Although we had been together for almost 10 years, it still felt like, man, we got some more gas in the tank. Like, let's put out some new music and let's go out and crush this thing a few more times before we hang it up, essentially, or transition our mindset to a different, to a different thing. And so yeah, long story short, he came to me after that text. I was like, why don't you come to my house tomorrow, bro? Because we got to talk about some things. Like, there's clearly you've been having thoughts, so I'd love to hear where your head's at, what you want to do, X, Y, and Z, and I'd love to tell you where my head's at. So he came over and we had really good conversation for like an hour, and I was able to be really honest and he was able to be really honest, and he just basically said, man, I'm really feeling called, like this is the time for me to do this, and I really need your support and want your support. And I was, I tried to be really understanding and hear him and hear his heart, and he had a strong desire to go to do that, and as a friend and a brother, like I really wanted to, and I even told him, like, dude, I'll do whatever I can to support you. Like, we've had an incredible run. Whatever you ultimately want to do, I want you to be happy. And I want you to follow your gut and your heart. And if that means not doing this, then so be it. But I beg you to reconsider. I beg you to.
It wasn't the path that you wanted at the time.
That was not the path that I wanted. No, basically begged him. And also the first couple weeks, it was just me like trying to gather information. Like, really, what does this look like to you? Is this a full-blown career shift, or is this just the one album side project? Because that's a way different conversation. If you just want to go put out one album during the pandemic, and that's a whole different scenario. But after I really talked to him for a long time and gathered as much info as I could, it was like, no, he wants to get a new deal, be on radio, do the whole thing, tour, like put out albums, multiple albums. He wants to pursue a career
Solo
change.
career.
So I told him basically that day, I said, okay, here's what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing to not do. And I'm willing to do everything that you want to do. And I'm willing to support you, and it's your decision to make. It's not my decision ultimately. So but the one thing I will say is my boundary is I'm not willing to do both. I'm not willing to do Florida Georgia line and then have a direct competitor that's my partner doing the same exact thing. I also told him I don't think I deserve 50% of you if I'm willing to give 100, and I don't think your solo career deserves 50% of you if you really want to do this. I said, you know what it takes to build a career. It takes every ounce of creativity and resources and energy and whatever you got in the tank to give. So essentially, I told him where my boundary stood, and I said, buddy, I love you. I want what's best for you. I want you to be happy. But ultimately, I'm not willing to do both, and you have to make a decision. Do you want to keep doing this with me, or do you want to go do it on your own? And I beg you to do it with me, because I truly believe that you and I, there's some kind of magic that's anointed, it's ordained, it's special, and I can't even put a finger on it, but me and you are stronger together than we are apart. Bottom line, I'm stronger with you and you're stronger with me. There's no way around it.
Let me ask you this. At some level, did you understand his perspective of the drive to want to do it? If you could separate the timing, because I guess I'm trying to think in his shoes. So you guys do have magic. You did build something together, but in a sense, you were out front for most of that, because singing primarily on the majority of the songs. And I'm just thinking, if I'm in his shoes, he feels, well, I'm an artist, I've got things to say, things to sing. There's a lot about me you haven't explored yet, and we've had all this success, but I feel like there's a part of me that's missing. I want to go pursue. Did you get that? Do you understand that
he
part?
did say something along those lines, and I definitely understood from one perspective of like, man, like, I know he's felt a little bit behind the scenes, and I know he hasn't felt like he hasn't taken much of the lead role in the music, but I even try to tell him, I'm like, but think about all the other verticals and leadership that you've been able to do, and the businesses you've been able to start, and the cool things that you've been able to do as a leader that I'm not even a part of because of what we've done. Like, you are a special person with special talents and gifts, and we wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you bringing your strengths to the table when we started out, and your gifts and he was sharp as a tack, bro. He knew everybody. We'd walk in a meeting or walk in a room or a party or something, and early on, I was the guy that didn't care about, I was like, I just want to like play shows. Like, I'm not here to network. I don't even care. I just want to play shows and write songs. But BK was like very focused, very business-minded, savvy, knew everybody and what their roles were in town and in the business and who we needed to talk to and how we needed to get, So it was a really, really special partnership. It always was. But
did you feel musically like y'all were both? You didn't feel that as much. You felt like y'all were both carrying the weight. You just had different roles. You were just singing more, and he was behind.
Yeah, we both had, but it felt equal for sure. And we wrote all the time together. And
I'm not certainly implying that he didn't feel like it was equal. I'm
sure by the end. I mean, there were certain things that happened in hindsight where you're like, man, I wish so-and-so would have handled that a bit differently. Even down to our producer back in the day, Joey, who we love. But he's not a sensitive guy. He's very direct. He's going to tell you how it is. There was no sensitivity there. And with any dynamic in any group, like, there's emotions, there's insecurities, there's things that you need to kind of acknowledge, lean into, be sensitive around. And
I know it's his style.
Joey's great.
Successful.
Yeah, Joey's a great producer. He taught us so many things. We call it, studio boot camp. I mean, Joey just he was great. But there were some things like that where you're just like, oh, I think that ended up.
You felt for your partner in that moment.
Felt for him, and also it helped me have a lot more empathy later on to be like, man, I mean, I get
As
why
you
you're-
look back now,
Yeah,
you're
you're
like,
like-
I could see where it may be the way that was
maybe he
handled.
felt less than.
Started
or
losing
maybe
his
he
voice a
felt-
little bit.
Right, exactly. Losing his voice is a good. So I think, yeah, he had a desire to, I want to try something on my own. I want to see if I can do it. He even said, like, one day when I have kids, like, I want my kids to hear my voice on the radio. And he wanted to stand alone and see what he could do, right? And I understand that. As a man, I'm like, dude,
Did you
I get
try
it.
to solve for it by saying, is there a way we can get you out front more, give you
I think I really took more of the approach of, look what we have done to help you with, like, because there were moments where I would really push, like, let BK sing this, like we're a duo, and quite frankly, in some of those songs, yeah, you can't really even hear BK. So I was pushing for that too. I knew that was important for BK, but yeah, I still think he wanted to prove that he could do it on his own. Or
I make up because I'm trying to identify what probably landed well in that season and what you look back on now and add a perspective and say, man, if I could have handled this one a little differently, maybe, because I think the outcome is the outcome. You guys are going in different directions and chasing your thing. But the fallout, the perception the public got is disheartening, because it was
that is
two
disheartening.
good friends, two good partners that suddenly both of you got painted in the corners like, well, he's this and he's this, and it feels like a government shutdown kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who's right? Both, neither.
I think that was the most unfortunate part of it all. Because at this point, I'm actually happy that all this happened, as wild as that is to say. And at the time, I was extremely frustrated. I was confused. I didn't understand. There were times where I was way too blunt and direct with BK. There was times where I felt silenced and felt like, well, it's not my story to tell, so we're just not going to talk to the public about what's going on. It was also over the course of about a year and a half or 2 years. Like, it wasn't like it happened overnight. Actually, it kind of did happen overnight, but we still had obligations we had to do. There were certain things that, like, the public didn't know about any of it until way later on. And then at that point, the narrative had gotten spun a certain way and it became political, when in reality, it had nothing to do with politics. Like, me and BK and the FGL dynamic had nothing.
It wasn't
one thing to do with politics, but during the political tension and the polarizing, it was around the election, and BK had become very vocal with his political views, even though we had decided way early on in our career that we're not a political band. We're not ever going to talk about politics. Nobody wants to become the Dixie Chicks. Let's just make music and party. That's what we do. BK and I both, like, we've never been, especially me, like, politics is like a foreign thing to me. Like, I literally didn't grow up in a political home, don't know anything about politics. Actually, it's embarrassing, to be honest, now at this age, how little I know about politics. And I've learned more now over the years, probably the hard way. But yeah, so you're coming from a guy in BK, we never even had political discussions or conversations for 10 years, but then he became pretty passionate about it, and I became completely ignorant, as I always have been until around this time.
I do want to get into there. I definitely want to talk about that part, and I want to make sure I want to understand this first part. Because I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm in your shoes and my world got unearthed in more ways than one. I mean, you said everything started to fall apart, and I'd forgotten about the weight of that injury, how significant that was, because you had those three
kids under three,
in the house, and you're not a guy that sidelined very well.
No, I don't.
So I would imagine the FGL conversation, you're already loaded with stress, and then this comes. And so stress usually leads to a little desperation and fear when you have an uncertain outcome in the future. So it's almost like you're on your heels trying to navigate this thing in the best headspace that you can. But you're loaded with all this.
Right.
Do you think that, if you look back, do you think that impacted any of it, any overreaction on your part, or how if I could have been a little more sensitive here? I know you've said to me before, I don't have regrets on how it ultimately landed. I think I stayed in my truth, but there were certain conversations and things that went a little south that I wished it wouldn't have. They were emotionally charged, and my part in it is
I really chose to just try to be quiet and just let things play out, which is also not my personality at all. But I was really advised and trying to practice discipline and self-control of, like, let me just try to always take the higher road. If I don't have anything good to say, don't say it, but also stick to my truth and be honest, with BK. And I feel like we had a lot of great conversations. I was, at that point, I honestly can say there's not a whole lot that I did or said that I would take back, but I do regret unfollowing BK publicly at one point of this whole scenario, because that also fed this narrative and blew the whole thing out of proportion when it was really unnecessary. And that was that was just completely, that was naive on my behalf and irresponsible, and also definitely emotionally charged and probably situationally driven. I'll never forget, bro. I was in the middle of having COVID. I was on my 8th day on the bus in my driveway by myself. And yeah, confused, scared, wondering what's going on, isolated from my friends or family. And then, I was spending a lot of time on Instagram, and I'm seeing my partner talking about how the pandemic's not real and how we need to be playing shows, which, looking back in hindsight, I totally agree with him. But in the time, I'm like, bro, I'm 8 days away from my kids because I'm quarantined on my tour bus because I got COVID, and it's very real for me. You know what I mean? So I even called him when I did that and said, hey, bro, no hard feelings. I love you, but I just can't I just can't do that.
Well, I remember back
And that was
then, you even said that part of it wasn't so much of what your partner was saying, it's that y'all had agreed not to go down that path.
Yeah.
And it was hard to watch. But that was such an interesting time, because I can relate to, I didn't know what I know now. When I look back after I've done a lot of deep research on certain parts of the way I navigated the pandemic as a business owner, as a family, so at least part of the leadership of our family, how I challenged a lot of the folks in my extended family system who weren't navigating a certain way. And it's still so polarizing that I even hesitate to say, well, this is where I stood. And now I look back and I'm not sure I believed everything I believed.
Oh yeah.
It's not that I'm not scared of saying it. I just don't, we're trying to build bridges here.
Right.
I don't want to give people's ears a reason to not dive into this conversation, because I think none of us knew how to handle it. And we were facing the most uncertain time that we've ever faced, and at least in my generation, in that we had an uncertain future. We didn't know where it was going for a hot minute, and everything that we were getting fed was just, it's worse than you think, worse than you think, worse than you think. We're all gonna, and then we also all got isolated, which is the worst. It's the two things the human brain fears the most, and it all happened to us collectively. So I look back and I have a lot of regrets. To hear you even say, I'm not even sure that I don't agree with some of what he was saying around playing shows and all that stuff, because at the time, depending on what you were listening to, it was hard to know what we were being fed and how to navigate anything.
So true. Yeah. So yeah, there was, I was very intentional during that time. Not that I did it perfectly, but I very much tried to everything that came out of my mouth, be very careful, because I knew what was riding on this choices that were being made over that course of that time. And I didn't want to burn the bridge any more than it needed to be. I didn't want to ruin. I just wanted to, my ultimate goal was to preserve what we had built. And I knew that, not kind of coming to the table with hopefully my best self or my most adult self would not be constructive. You know what I'm saying? In the effort to salvage what we had built. You know what I mean?
And so that move you made, which I'm hearing you say, if I regret any of it, that was one of the steps that I made. I probably would have done differently. And if you guys weren't famous and didn't have all these eyes on you, was it a human move of man, it's one of my best friends and a business partner, and I just need a little space for a minute. And some of us can do that. Nobody ever knows.
Right.
Because I was
going to say, it's the same way the same exact thing you would do if you went through a breakup, but a real, a breakup. You unfollow the person because you don't want to see them all the time, whatever. But yeah, that was in the public eye, and everyone, once somebody picked up on that in that scenario, it didn't serve anybody well, and so that's why I wish I could have done that differently.
But I think sometimes when we are hurt, you're describing, and you were hurt in a scenario and confused and overwhelmed, so you made the mistake of like, I'm going to unfollow him. Now, little did we know that it would be a public, well, I said, everything's a public headline. I'm learning that from doing this. I've so well intended with some of the things I've tried to walk people into, and they're grabbing the most salacious clickbait headline.
Totally.
And that's kind of what gets stories to travel. So it's predictable, but you're also human. So you stepped into that, but they perceive that as a blow to them. So they're hurt and they're going to react, which is really human, I think. Even though it probably would have been better if you didn't unfollow out of hurt. But that's where I think when partnerships or friendships or relationships start to go awry, I think they're supposed to at certain seasons. I'm married, and my wife and I have those moments.
But you don't get on Instagram and start talking and arguing with your wife on public forums. You call each other, you go look at each other in the face, and you sit there and talk about it.
Fair.
Which is what we should have done, which is what I should have done. But at the moment, I just wasn't thinking clearly, and it was on my phone a lot and tired of looking at it. So I'll just unfollow him for now, and then I just literally, it was that quick.
And what I'm hearing you say,
and that was literally like that week. The next week, I was probably like, it was a completely different. Like, you know how fast you kind of like almost not change your opinion, but definitely with intel, with things as you process, you're like, yeah, this is BS. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing as a human race right now?
You start to look at it. How much of this makes sense?
So, yeah, I mean, I went through a lot of like, oh, I think this. Oh, I think that. Oh, I think I believe it. Oh, I learned this. Oh, I mean, because we were all trying to figure it out. And I mean, I almost on every topic, if you were to ask me what I thought about almost every topic in 2020, I would have been able to tell you. And then if you'd asked me today, it would be almost the complete opposite of what I thought then. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that goes along with this whole thing of just being naive, trying to navigate it best you know how, trying to protect yourself and your emotions while being in the public face. Also, my approach with the whole thing was like, I told BK, like, buddy, this is your decision and choice, and I'd love if you could lead the charge on let's do it, but I need you to be willing and open to at least tell you what we're doing. Like, we have to vocalize what we're doing. We have to tell our fans. It's not really my story to tell. It wasn't my decision to make, but I'll be patient. I'll respect your desire to wait. Let's just wait. So we didn't say anything. So then I come back like, bro, like, we need to get this out there. Like, your world's going in one direction, mine's going in another. The world doesn't know. So what happened was basically never really wanted to tell the world our truth, and even till this day, he'll say, "No, I've always wanted to do both," which is not false. Like, that's a true statement. He has always wanted to do both.
I want to make sure to touch that. I really want to make sure, because I think this is such a common thing where the catalyst of where we as a culture got divided. I think there's certain parts of your story that are illuminating elements of it. And the Inauguration, which created this whole narrative about you, which I knew behind the scenes, your friend, it wasn't necessarily true. People were painting you into this extremist political category. It's like, that's not even what he thinks or how he moves or how he believes. But it's interesting because you made the decision. I want to get there in a minute. But I'm really just curious about how that started to break down. Because when I look back with the information I was being fed, and I was calling all the biggest healthcare institutes in the world, because I work part in healthcare too, trying to make decisions about my company and what we should do. And I was trying to follow the science, but the science was being politicized, and it was very tough to figure it out. But when I look back, for when we as a group, as a family, made certain decisions about how we could gather, when everybody was saying you can't gather, well, then how do we do it safely? Well, you have to do it this way safely. And let's say there were one or two people that were like, I'm not doing that.
Right.
And at that time, I was angry.
Yeah.
I was like, how could you put the family second? That's selfish.
Right.
I look back now and I think I wished I'd have went to them and say, tell me more about why you feel that way.
Same.
I wished I'd have went and had a deeper conversation so I could have understood their perspective.
Totally.
Because I even look back now and I was like, dang, they were kind of ahead of the curve there.
Yeah. We literally have told Hayley's parents, because it kind of broke us up pretty good as a family, all this stuff. We looked at them now and said, guys, you were right.
We were wrong.
You were right. We were wrong. 100%. We're so sorry. Like, we're so embarrassed that we set the boundaries that we did. We're so embarrassed that we tried to shame you guys. Like, you were right. and we're really sorry. You know what I mean? But even just doing that, it's like automatically with them, it's healed and we're moved on and we've accepted and it's been great. But yeah,
you didn't have to do that
at that time. I mean, remember at that time, there was so much pressure, like, especially as a business owner that had many families relying on us to go to work. You know, I'm like, man, I don't believe in going and getting a vaccine, but I do believe in doing what I think feels responsible to keep our operation running so that we can feed these families. So I was very much like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to pray about it and hopefully go with my gut on this. And do I regret getting a vaccine? Yes, I do. I'm still dealing with that today. But
health-wise,
but would I have done it any differently? I don't really know, because I thought that equaled going back to work. You know what I mean? And there were a few people that you probably even know a few, and I know a few that lost their jobs because they didn't want to get them. And I thought, man,
a bunch.
That is extreme. Just go get the shot, you know? But it's like, now you realize what the shot actually was a lot more, and you're just like, man, like, they were right. I wish I'd have been bold enough to say, no, I'm convicted enough to make that stand, right? Because for me, it wasn't a strong conviction. It was more of just...
And it wasn't so much what they said, it was how they were saying it. And I think that's what's happening everywhere right now is... when you have to say something really loudly to try to cut through and be heard, it feels divisive and against. And I think it's somebody trying to figure it out, trying to get information out there. And if we could slow down on both sides, because if I'm in your shoes, I'm looking at that scenario like, because I'm trying really hard not to get in any bias because I respect both you guys. You and I'll be, to be completely honest, you and I are closer. We've been friends a little longer. We've known each other. We still hang out. Our families are close. Our kids are close. Yeah. But I really respect BK as well.
Yeah.
And I was some of those conversations. I was a part of some of that. So I was pretty up close to it. And I could really see and hold both of your perspectives. And in some ways, as a guy in the middle of it was painful to watch because our emotions were so hot. But it's such a reflection of the time that we're in as I go back on it. And I was there too with a lot of things, but it didn't happen publicly. And when it happens publicly and you get millions of people to weigh in on it, I think it compounds the pressure and the stress. It gets people further in their corners. That's kind of what we're seeing out in culture right now. And whereas two guys who came together and created some magic and decided to go a different direction and try to create some new magic, there had to be a bigger, darker story there. And people always want it. They're going to want it out of this conversation.
Right.
They're going to want, what's the drama here?
Right.
And that's not what we're here to talk about.
Right.
I know how you feel about BK. I know if I were to say, Miles, tell me about BK? How do you feel about him?
And to be honest, real quick, to pigtail, is that the word? Pigtail. To put some pigtails on you, Miles.
Fixed Liv's hair this morning.
No, I think you're right, dude. I mean, ultimately, this only became big and dramatic on the internet. It became so magnified and there's not a good guy, bad guy in this equation.
I don't know that anybody's right or wrong.
There's not a right, wrong. There's not a good guy, bad guy, which everyone wants to do that on the internet. They want to say right, wrong, good guy, bad guy, team BK, team T-Hub, team liberal, team conservative. Like, dude, it's not even like that. BK stuck to his convictions and led with his gut and decided to make a decision based on his passion. I set a boundary that I wasn't willing to cross. And it is what it is. And it was, honestly, we've both accepted it way before the internet accepted it. And that's also part of the problem, I think. Well, part of, in hindsight, what was a bit of an issue was once BK and I made that, once BK called me and said, thank you for your support, this is the decision that I'm making. It was in October of 2020. Well, everything else that happened I should say this. There was a lot that happened between that phone call, and I got to figure out what's next for me. From that timeline to the timeline of this becoming pretty public, there was so much that went on that made sense to me because now I'm a solo artist. Whether it's going and writing a song and doing a song with Tim McGraw, whether it's going and playing the Inauguration without BK, because Tim McGraw got asked to go do the Inauguration for a song that we did together, and so Tim asked me to do it with him, and of course, I'm like honored to be called by my country to go play an inauguration with Tim McGraw, who's one of my heroes. Of course, I go do it, right? But I had sort of forgotten that the rest of the world just assumed that me and BK were all is well. If nothing else, all is well, but they're definitely still together. Otherwise, they would announce that they're breaking up, right? But we had already broke up 6 months ago, even though we didn't acknowledge it publicly. And there was that phone call that I'll never forget that was very clear. The decision was made. It was like the phone call when you're breaking up with your boyfriend, girlfriend, and you hang up the phone and you're like, well, that's done now. Like, I literally hung up the phone. I was like, wow, that's like the end of FGL. Like, whoa. It was like heavy. I remember I was riding to a right that day, and I just remember thinking, like, having that feeling of same way I did in high school when there's a breakup that happens. You hang up the phone and you're just like, okay, it's a different season now. Like, that is gone. That is done. The light switch has been, I call it the switch, but it's been turned on or turned off, and this is what's next. And so I really struggled with that time in between where I knew what was going on, BK knew what was going on, but no one else did. And no one else had that perspective or those lenses to look through, whether it was, well, why did Tyler unfollow BK, or why did Tyler put out a song with Tim McGraw? Because all that stuff got thrown back in my face a year and a half later. But again, so there was that.
I want to
fed a lot of that narrative too.
I feel like there's still a lot of, my read is there's still a lot of unprocessed emotion around it. And there should be. It's fresh. We've been moving and surviving, hadn't had a lot of change. I do think that you've landed, this is our offline conversations I'm bringing into the online ones. You've landed in a place where I think you've grown, changed, and healed from that time. And I think when you look back and talk about it, to me, it's like, man, I love that dude.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we made history together. I know you care about him as a human. I know that. And I know you look back at that time and you've been now in a place of contemplation about your own part. And gosh, I hate the way my perception landed. Half my fan base thinks I'm somebody I'm not. Right. And half of Music Row is misunderstanding this, and my industry people. And maybe when I was 20 something and kind of had that screw you attitude, I'm going to go make music and I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm a dad now. Right. And I'm a citizen, and I'm starting to pay attention to the world more, and I'm way more involved in philanthropic endeavors and solving problems, and I do care. I do think you still have that artist mentality that I always am jealous of when it comes to y'all's what you create. It's like, I'm going to put it out there at all costs and be willing to take the heat that comes with it. But I do see you caring more. And if I strip it all back, I think, okay, the last thing I want is what happens in these conversations, and it will. Somebody's going to clip a headline. And it's going to probably feel like BK and his team will be discounted because they're not talking about it. It happened with our other friends on that other, the guys that do Busting with the Boys. And I had never talked to them about that. I don't know if it was well-intended or not, but it turned into, I'm right. And then the next day I was like, wait a minute, that's my story. I'm right. And it felt a little bit like
It didn't do any good.
I gotcha, because it just elevated the problem. And I really want to make sure that, I appreciate the raw truth you're putting into it, but I want to make sure this doesn't do the same. Yeah. Because I know your heart coming into it. It's like, I really want people to know I'm zoomed out from this. Right. Because really, if you break it down, I can see both sides. You've got a guy who really wants to try to create some of his own music and his art. And he's at the prime of a duo, historic success, massive deal. His partner sees that as a distraction and a threat to the business. The business is your livelihood. Mm-hmm. You're already sidelined, and so you're like, strategically, that just doesn't make sense to me. I think that's a real threat to the business to go moonlight on the side. He didn't. He saw it as, I think we can totally do both. We can totally use FGL and he's like, you can do your thing, I can do my thing. Let's let FGL support both. And you at the time made a business decision that doesn't make sense. And I think I remember when you were trying to make that decision, you even outlined your time. You were like, well, if I put 100% of my time here, I got my family and these 100% of my time. That's way different than the first 10 years we built FGL. There's no time left to go support a solo endeavor and FGL and raise kids. So I remember you were thoughtful about how you went through it, but nobody knew that. Everybody thought it was just as emotional. And it got into, well, FGO ended because you went solo, and it was FGO ended because you weren't willing to compromise on my solo run.
Right.
And so how would you...
And FGL ended because Tyler's a liberal, allegedly, and BK's a conservative, which is not even the case. But yeah, that was also the narrative too. How could they let politics break up the band? I'm like, we didn't. But that's what everyone, because we didn't talk about, we never really got online and spoke truth. So everyone created their own narrative. And
So you think that was a big mistake
media
on both
outlets.
y'all's part? Is
if
even
I
though
could
it
go
was hard
back,
to
I
talk
would have
to
got
them?
online and talked, because it would have eliminated a lot of
speculation,
the false narratives, outlets, running with stories that weren't true or making up. So yeah, that was probably the most frustrating part, was sitting back and letting all that go on and not engage with it and not say, guys, y'all don't know me at all, do you? You think I would actually do that? You think I would actually, but I just chose to not pour fuel on that fire, and really just was advised to just sit back, and in that context is sort of a lose-lose situation. But I'm such a person that desires to be known. I usually wear my heart on my sleeve. I speak my mind, and I can be very vulnerable, very direct, and that's the way that I like to carry myself, and so for me to also feel like a responsibility not to speak into something because it's maybe not my story to tell, that was hard for me, for sure. And then it did become my story to tell a little bit, but still, it was only my perspective, right? And then again, what I'm basically saying today is just like, I wanted to get online. I should have got online 3 years ago and said, this is what's going on, guys. And there's going to be people that believe me and that don't believe me. And I don't even care, but I got to speak the truth. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, that was tough. And then I do feel like there's been a little bit of a linger there where it's like, man, it's been 5 years now, and I still feel like I'm not truly known. That's why there's desire to like get my story out there and be even more authentic and just, less filtered. Just be myself,
Well, and I'm trying to think how I would advise if I were sitting there now. And part of the reason I think advisors would have been cautious of you guys talking at that time was it was so emotionally charged that would it have just highlighted and I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. And therefore it's still going to create that downstream impact of people making up more narrative about it, because people love drama. Why? Because it's a distraction from the drama that we carry in our own lives and the shortcomings carrying us. If we can get hooked up in other people's drama. But I think a lack of it, I think your instincts are right. I think a lack of context created a bigger void, which created more narrative for people to make up stuff. I don't know that either of you going out and trying to prove the other, yeah, but you're not hearing my point of view. I honestly think it would have been, and I know you hope that y'all could sit down together for an interview and talk about it, but that's what I would have wished could happen that way. I think at some point it needs to happen now,
right?
Because no matter what, you're getting one side of the
totally,
perspective. And whoever's aligned with is going to believe that, and whoever's not is going to believe it. So,
and there's actually nothing that me and BK aren't aligned on, except the fact that he thinks we can do both, and I don't think we can. So
y'all still are there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And are you talking?
Granted, I hadn't spoke to BK a lot in the last couple of years, but we're going on a hike next week. So the way I see it is, I have a desire for that friendship. I miss the guy that I was partners with for 10 years. I miss my old roommate, my best man at my wedding. And if nothing else, we should have a relationship. It doesn't have to be what it was. It doesn't have to equal FGL doing anything, but we need to repair, you know what I mean? And spend some time together face to face and just walk and talk and hang and go fishing or get a guitar out. You know what I mean? And so I'm excited for that because, yeah, it feels like at this point, enough time has gone by. What's happened has happened. But there hasn't been any real repair at all. And so what I'm hungry for is, let me get my friend back. You know what I mean? What we fall in love, what brought us to the dance in the first place? You know what I mean? Let's get back to there. And obviously life has changed a lot and the dynamics have changed a lot and we're in way different places in life. So we may never be able to get back to what brought us to the dance. being dead broke right out of college and desperate for a career. You know what I mean? Or, living in a home with 4 other dudes and pursuing music all together as hard as we can. Like, that's obviously not the reality of the seasons that we're in now, but there's a new season that I think is hopeful, where it's like, dude, like, we had so many amazing years of blessings and doing the craziest things that our wildest dreams couldn't have imagined. Like, we should be doing life in some capacity still, talking about those days, if nothing else. You know what I mean? So I am there, like, as far as like the desire to heal and to rebuild that friendship, and whether that ever ends up turning into anything FGO related again, like, that's really hard to say, but I am here and I'm ready. And, I've told BK that, and that's why he's reached back out and said, I'm in town for this event. Why don't we hang out? And I'm like, cool. So there's we're both like trying, and we're both making an effort, and I'm excited to see where that goes. But yeah, it's been pretty quiet over the last, I don't know, 3 years.
Well, I really think this story on both of y'all's parts, because I'm a fan of you guys, fan of the music, but I really think this story is important, and I'm glad that you both have the courage to get back together and see what happens, because could you rebuild a relationship or a friendship and disagree on something very monumental towards your future direction?
Right.
I think you can.
Yeah.
I think we used to be able to do that kind of stuff all the time. I've still got lots of friends that are hard right, hard left, in the middle, everywhere. And I'll say I don't have the relationship I used to, because everybody's affiliating with who believes with them the most and spending time. And there's only so much time when you become a parent. Your social life kind of starts to dissipate.
Totally.
But I'm realizing it's like, well, is that them or is that me? And should I be reaching out to people that maybe I don't align with or agree with? And can we still have something?
Right.
Is humanity getting it wrong right now?
Right.
Basically. And so I think that's a worthwhile endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that I know you and know you're going to be honest in what you do. And that's why I said I still feel like there's some emotion charge there. I don't know how there could be. That relationship is too much a big part of your life.
Right.
But I think there's a higher road element of, I want to be accountable for my part in this.
Mm-hmm.
The part that didn't land well. I'm not saying the outcome didn't need to happen. Maybe it's what needed to happen, because he is getting to go chase his dream right now. You're chasing a dream you didn't think you'd be chasing, but I think you've been having some
happy I'm here.
He found some meaning with it. But my hope is that the perspective can shift, and that the ripple that you guys had with the breakup, which is political and, see, we told you, it's the FGL party guys that didn't care about country music anyway, just all the crap that was out there. No, we're two humans that were in a relationship and a business partnership, and it kind of went south. A third of it that was out there was true.
Right.
The part that was true, we own. It was a different season. You've just heard from me that I was going through a super challenging time, so I didn't have all my best agency on board. Looking back, I wouldn't change the outcome, but I certainly would change the approach.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose a relationship just because we have a massive disagreement.
Right.
And now you're trying to repair that. So I think hats off to that.
Thanks, Milo. Appreciate that.
I do want to hear about the inauguration, because we touched on it briefly.
Yeah.
Talk about it for a minute, because that is a primary narrative out there about you that I think is unfair in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But you just said it so casually earlier. You were like, I got asked to, well, you said two things. I want to check that. You said, you said, we're not going to do anything political because I don't feel qualified, which hats off, high five to you as an entertainer. Dolly's the queen of this. I love how she's handled that. She's like, why would you want my political opinion as an entertainer? I don't do politics.
Right.
I don't study these things.
Right.
I entertain.
Right.
She's like, I don't. And therefore she's been able to keep eyes and ears her on both sides, and she ends up being the artist that bridges it together. It's gotten very polarized in a lot of settings in the music community. But you said it casually. It's like, well, we don't do politics, but in this case, you kind of chose to step into it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think you did it kind of not even thinking about the outcome, because you're like, well, I got asked to go play an inauguration, first of all, with Tim McGraw, one of my, I wrote this song.
Right.
It would have worked, by the way, for either party.
Right.
It was divided. It was talking about bringing people back together.
Right.
We're divided. I think if you would have done it for Trump's inauguration, it would have worked. If you'd have done it for Biden's inauguration, it would have worked, because it was about a message of unity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they called, Tim called. I don't know how it happened, but they called, and you chose to go do it. Did it enter your mind at that time that this might have some backlash?
Not actually, as naive as it sounds, no, it did not. It did not actually. And that song was so much a reflection of my heart where I was at that moment that I was like so proud of it anyways. Like, man, I don't want to be divided. I don't really care. I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but like, I don't really care about politics, right? So like, I just didn't understand why our world was becoming so extremely divided and polarized over what was going on in the political space, right? And all I wanted is like, guys, we're all as a world, we're all going through something together. Like, we're going through a global pandemic together. Like, we should be uniting as humans and not worrying about political lines in the sand, you know what I mean? And as much, I mean, I know it's important, and now I know, I mean, politics matter, and I know it's important, and you know, especially local politics, but like, for the most part, like, it's just never been a part of my vocabulary. It's never been a part of my mind, my processing, nothing. Like, I just don't think about, again, I grew up very simple, and I grew up not in a political home. I grew up going to church and riding dirt bikes and playing basketball. Like, I did not, you know. And so, my wife did grow up in a more political home, so she actually helped me become a bit more educated on, like, Tyler, you can't say that. I'm like, what do you mean? We just watched 10 kids get shot up in school. Why can't I say that we should do background checks? And she's like, because that's a really big political thing. I mean, I remember one time I got on social and started talking about gun control. And from a gun owner, from a redneck like myself, I thought, oh, they'll hear me because I got tons of guns. I love guns. I shoot guns and blah, blah, blah. But we should still be protecting our rights by doing it responsibly, right? Bro, talk about a can of worms. So I opened that can real quick, and that's when I realized that was the first time. This was a couple years ago, but this was the first time I accidentally tripped and fell into a political conversation whatsoever, right? And that was also when I learned, like, yo, I don't want to touch this. Like, I don't want to touch the politics stuff because I'm not educated around it. I don't know. It's like Dolly said. Like, I just want to be a good human. The one person that I put my trust and faith and hope in is Jesus, not a politician of any side, right? So, to answer your question, sorry, I wrote this song when I was on the bus during the pandemic. I wrote 10 songs by myself. And just that isolation actually fueled me creatively, and I sat there with nothing else to do, and I just wrote songs. And one of those songs was this song called Undivided, which I sent to Tim McGraw and said, man, what do you think about this tune, you know? And he called me up instantly. He goes, dude, I love this song. This is such a good tune. Like, I got to put this song out. And like, I want to put it out like in 2 weeks. Because of what's going on. Like, this can't be a song that comes out in 6 months. So I'm like, bro, that's amazing. Like, that's the best call you can get from Tim McGraw. You know what I'm saying? And then he said, I'd love for you guys to be on it with me. And I'm like, oh boy, he has no idea. Because again, this was 3 or 4 months after BK and I had that phone call, right? So then I called Tim, like, hey bro, just so you kind of know, a little context, like, BK and I are taking a break from doing FGL stuff whatsoever. Like, he's going to do the solo thing. I'm probably just going to be like a stay-at-home songwriter, dad, you know, just stay-at-home dad and worry about being a dad for a while. So basically there won't be any like FGL going on. So I guess like I would love for you to put this song out, but I can't do anything. And he was like, well, I'd love for you to just stay on it if you want to. And I thought, well, heck yeah, this is great. I'll stay on this. Maybe I'll just be a songwriter that features on songs occasionally as Tyler Hubbard. So anyways, I agreed to do that. And then a few weeks later, Borchetta calls me and he goes, hey buddy, I got a really cool opportunity. I just got a call. They want you and Tim to play the Inauguration, that song that he just put out. And in my mind, I just thought, wow, what a cool honor. Like, that's really neat. I mean, to be honest, and that was before country music was like really culturally hot. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense, it even meant more back then. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, because normally that's a pop act that
you
call.
Yeah, exactly. Big, major. You know, you name it, whoever. So anyways, I just thought, yeah, man, I'm happy to do that. And at the time, I didn't have many advisors that I could call and ask opinions like that. And I didn't even think I needed to. And I just thought, man, cool, this will be great. Yeah, when is it? I'll be there. So we pre-taped it in Nashville, and obviously it didn't even feel like we weren't at the inauguration or whatever, but honored to be a part of it, and we were a part of it, and it was great. And then, that kind of got turned on me. And would I have done it if it were the other way around? Absolutely. Would I have done it still today if I had the opportunity? That's actually, I don't really know, to be honest. I'd have to really
on either
think
side.
about it. On either side, for sure. But even then, like if Trump had been inaugurated, I would have played it, right? I mean, honestly, I was as middle as you could just about be at that point. But at the same time, I wanted to support my country, right? And I didn't know that automatically, even though I should have. It was a bit, again, being a bit naive, that if you're a part of an inauguration, you're going to be categorized as that side of the party lines. You know what I mean? Obviously. They probably didn't think a Republican was coming to play the Democrat inauguration. But again, I wasn't so gung-ho on either side. I was just like, no, I'm just going to participate, right?
Well, it was interesting because I was naive at that time too. I don't think anybody really knew that you had to be so affiliated with one or the other side to be socially accepted. I don't think we knew. It feels like that was the front end of that starting to happen, where both sides would get in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe or think anything over here, it can be really dangerous. You could be misunderstood. You could feel like you're trying to, because you could say what you said. I remember that gun thing you talked about, because I was like, you and I've shot guns together quite a bit.
Right.
I'm a big outdoorsman and a big hunter. I also have a foundation that works with survivors of mass shootings, and I've been up close to way too many of them. And I'm a scared parent that drops my kids off at schools, and I don't want to get fully into that now. And here's the reason why: it's not that I'm scared to do it and put myself out there. I just haven't seen the way people putting themselves out there make it any better or get us any closer to a solution.
Right.
And I don't want to contribute to the divide.
Right.
And until we can lower the noise, it's kind of like if I'm working with a client, and if they're hungry, sleepy, don't have a place to put a shelter over their head, and I'm trying to talk to them about their trauma when they were 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the cart's in front of the horse here.
Right.
First, you got to give people food, water, shelter, make sure they're okay, and then you might be able to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing if someone was dissociated or highly activated. It's not the time to try to get in. I wish I could remember this when I'm talking to my wife. Not that she's dissociated,
right.
But she's activated sometimes, and I just keep pouring it on. I keep saying, yeah, but here's what I believe.
Right.
Here's the solution.
Uh-huh.
Here's the solution. And all that does is make it worse. And that's what everybody seems to be doing right now, is let me see. Now, I'm going to get picked on for that, because some people are like, we got to use your voice. Look at the great activists of our time. I was like, yeah, but I look back at the great ones. I think they did it a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I think they found a compromise, and they had civil discourse, and they didn't hate either way. It was good conversations. Because I would, at some point, I'm not going to be able to avoid it on this format.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hope to get into this format, and I don't want a vanilla Switzerland show, but I want one that doesn't turn ears off, because it seems like most shows that get into that lane, you attract the ears that believe you.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up preaching to the choir, and you're not influencing any change one way or the other. I don't want that, you know. But I do think we're at this interesting dilemma, because I remember when you decided to go do that, I thought, just like Scott Burchett, I thought, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You got asked to play at a presidential inauguration. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many people get to do that, especially country artists?
Right.
That's a huge deal. I didn't think about the fact that it was Biden's inauguration, and that would mean something, because I remember we're on a thread with a whole bunch of other artists, and that thread is diverse, politically really diverse. And everybody that night was saying, congratulating you.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody threw the first one out, and we were piling on. It's like, congratulations, man. That's so cool you got to do something like that. And then the firestorm kind of started after. And I think because you and BK were in that spot at that time, it only elevated and it accelerated it. But I hope we get back to a time, I think you're wise to contemplate that answer now if it came back up. I've worked with a lot of other artists that have been asked to play one side or the other. And everybody's a little bit like, I don't know. And it's not always coming from a place of I'm trying to protect my neighborhood and I don't want to get online criticism and hate because y'all are used to that. It's, does this advance a narrative of pulling people back together and have good conversations, or is it going to get misinterpreted and not be worth the juice, not be worth the squeeze?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's why you're asking it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had thought about all those things back then, and but again, I don't have a lot of regrets through this whole thing. I mean, I can ultimately say that. Even doing that, I'm like, man, I can tell my kids I played an inauguration for our country. Like, was the backlash worth it? I don't know. Was the false narratives and feeling misunderstood worth it? Maybe, but I'm still proud of it. You know what I mean? I was really adamant. At the end of this thing, I just want to be able to be proud of myself and how I handled it. Because, yeah, there are times for sure, bro, where I wanted to just lose my shit. But I knew that wasn't going to be constructive or beneficial. And it does feel good to kind of have some time gone by and feel the healing. And then to be able to have conversations with BK and to be willing to, and for both of us to be willing to go hang out in a couple weeks and just rekindle the friendship. I mean, that's where it all started, and that's what's most important. And I don't want to ever leave this earth with any bad blood with anybody or any beef or any of that. And, is it unfortunate? Parts of it unfortunate how it played out? Maybe so, but ultimately I'm really happy where I'm at, but we're about to get to know each other again for sure. But yeah, I'm grateful for it. And all the hard times, the emotional times, the hard conversations, the phone calls. I mean, going through a divorce isn't easy, and that's essentially what I went through. You know what I mean? Luckily I have a lot of good friends in my wife to get to lean on, but yeah, man, it was traumatic and tough for me and Hayley and sure BK and B. Cole, so.
What do you hope for now? That because there's 3 or 4 things we talked about that inevitably are going to do one or two things. They're going to do both, because somebody will cut it and say, "Told you, he wants to take our guns," even though I know you got a safe full of them at home.
Right.
Also, you want smart solutions.
Yeah.
But you've realized even when and I remember when you stepped into that conversation, because you got invited from another friend who was really talking about it, and when you say naively, people that hearing this that don't know you would be like, "Really, you didn't think about that?" I can say, "No, he didn't." I know the way you move in the world. There's an innocence and a disconnectedness from all the noise that you try to keep your space in, so you can be creative, and you kind of follow your instinct. If somebody says, "Hey, this might be meaningful, you want to do this?" Okay, and then you give it a go.
If it seems meaningful to me, then I'm in. I don't really think about too much about, well, what does that mean, or what is the consequences, or.
But I see what they'll do. They could do here is they'll take that conversation and try to pull it back together. They might take that inauguration conversation and try to get into the politics thing again. They might take bits of the BK narrative we talked about and come back on you with that and say, "See." So if you were to is there anything in any of those directions you'd want to clarify and say, well, if you got the real version, the long form version, here's what I want you to know about me?
Yeah, good question. I think ultimately 30,000 foot view, if you really want to know me and the truth, and this will try to encompass all of this into one, but I don't follow a politician. I follow Jesus. I love BK. I'm extremely grateful for the decade of incredible life-changing experiences that we had. Does it hurt, or did it hurt? Unfortunately, going through a divorce and a breakup, yes, it was not easy. It was a tough time. Did we both handle it great? Probably not. But ultimately, I care about BK. I'm extremely proud of what we built. I'm extremely proud of those years. It's a big part of my story, so I don't want to just turn my back on it, and I want to still be able to celebrate it with not only BK, but our whole team that we did it with. Whether it's Seth, England, Chief, Joey, all those guys that we all kind of dispersed a bit, but now it feels like, guys, we had way too many blessings poured on us to not acknowledge how blessed we are, first of all, and not acknowledge the friendships that were made and built through it all. And, you know, at this point, I want to like highlight the good and celebrate the good and forgive and let go of the bad. And if for no other reason, for the sake of my kids to be able to grow up and say, look what my dad did. Like, not look at the success that he had, but look at how he repaired that relationship, you know, look at how he handled a really tough season, you know? And I think that's what's most important, 30,000 foot, you know, perspective on the whole thing. Am I grateful? Yes. I'm so grateful to be here now. I'm so grateful to kind of feel like I'm got my head above water. I can see a little bit more clearly, which helps even with the rebuild of the relationship with BK, like the desire's there. So yeah, man, I feel like ultimately I'm in a good place. And I will say I've accepted that not everyone's going to believe me. Not everyone's going to want to believe me. Not everyone's going to, they're not going to stop making up narratives. But I can also be really happy and content with knowing, but my truth is out there now. You can choose to take it or not. And quite frankly, I don't really care. I'd prefer you to believe the truth and let me feel validated that I spoke truthful enough to give you guys some context and some real narrative. But at the same time, I understand the world that I'm in, the internet, and again, people are drawn to drama. If this truth doesn't have enough drama for them, they'll create their own truth, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, just having it out there, letting people know who I put my faith in, where I stand with BK, where I stand with FGL, it's freeing for me. It feels really good because for so many years it was, we're just going to just put that under the rug and not talk about that or, you know, whatever. And that's just not who I am. So it feels good to talk. It feels really good to talk to you about it as a safe, you know, you're a safe place for me and always have been. And so just being able to be here and, you know, process some of this together has been really, really good for me. Good. So thanks.
Well, and I almost want to leave it there. I kind of want to because I just thought that was beautifully said. And yet I'm curious if you wanted to add anything on with the political narrative. I personally have a belief that people have the right to share certain parts of their stories, and I think there are certain parts that don't need to be shared, could or couldn't. I think depending on what role you're in. So I think the world's not going to like it. The world's not going to let go of the world. People that are watching critics, they're not going to let go until you say, well, here's what you think I am, but here's why I am. I'm not asking for that because I think that's your storytelling. It's nobody's business, frankly. But people have made up a story.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, I will say this, and you've already picked this up in this podcast, but if you think I'm a political person at all, you're already wrong. Just know that. Just know that I'm really not. Like, if I had to put myself somewhere in the political spectrum, it would be somewhere in the middle, probably leaning more right. But again, I put my faith and trust in Jesus, and I put my morals, values, and my guidance for life in the Bible, not political stances or not politicians or not campaigns. Like, I just don't, like I never have, and it just doesn't feed my soul. So yeah, I mean, just to be very clear, like, I'm really not a hardcore or anything. I'm a very like middle of the road kind of guy, leaning probably right based on my morals and values and where I came from. And I just want to love everybody. I think that's what we're called to do. I think this whole political setup and system in the first place is a bit created for divisiveness, and as long as our country's divided, then the goal is being met. You know what I mean? So I would rather not follow the masses and not have to pick a side and not have to feel like I gotta align or not align with every single person. It's like, hey, like, we may be misaligned, but what do we have in common? Oh, you got kids. Great. Let's talk about being a parent, or let's talk about what we're learning this week, or, you know, what Jesus is doing in our life instead of what politician was on the news this morning. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, as far as the political conversation goes, it's pretty simple with me, you know. Very proud to be an American, love my country, really proud to be from where I'm from, Georgia, really proud to be an American, but at the same time, yeah, I don't put all my faith and hope in that for sure.
Well, no, I personally have a conviction that you can be patriotic and
That's a good word.
and still have beliefs that go in different directions, and you don't have to fully camp out in something to feel like you're either patriotic or not based on where you are. I'm always in the business of trying to figure out, how do you solve problems? How do you first, and to solve a problem, you first have to recognize a pattern. So how do you do pattern recognition? Well, pattern recognition, if you step 3 steps back from what all's happening, it's very similar to what happens with an individual. If an individual has a lot of historic or current stress in their system and their nervous system is dysregulated, it can wreak havoc psychologically, health, physical health, relationally, leadership, everything. It can disrupt everything. And if I'm sitting across from somebody that's in that space, then I have to be creative enough to think about, what's the bridge in? Not what can I tell them that I know to be true, and see what happens with them, because that's just going to shut down the conversation. So I'm actually seeing those that are willing to try to figure out, how can I have a conversation? How can we have conversations with different people with different beliefs is one of the most patriotic things we can do. I really believe that. And that's one of the reasons you won't hear me talk about this subject a lot on here. Maybe I'll talk about it more downstream. I don't know. Part of it is that I'm a sensitive guy and I'm not ready for all the blowback that's coming. And also, but a bigger reason is I just don't know that that's the effective format to bring people in conversation back to a civil discourse place where we can start to get to solutions. I don't see it working at all. The louder it gets, the worse it gets. I don't see it working.
It just seems like a lose-lose sometimes, don't it?
And so I'm like, there's certain cards in my deck that people might be surprised that I'm really aligned here, and they may think I'm aligned there, and I'm okay with that, because I'd like to talk to people on both sides.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do in today's world. It's gotten really hard to do everywhere. And I hear you in that's who you attempt to be. It's who you want to be.
Totally. And I even think, in order to give myself some motivation to even become more educated in the political space, that's one of the motivators for me is, well, I want to know what the other side believes so I can relate to them and talk to them about anything in life without putting my foot in my mouth. Like, you know what I mean? Or looking really silly. Like, I at least need to have the basic knowledge around what everyone, either side believes. So yeah, that has been part of my desire to learn and grow in that space, but that's about the extent of it. And there are also issues that do become important when you become a parent, or you become, like you said, you're dropping your kids off at school. Yeah, you're going to think about the state of our country with the mass shootings in schools, of course, which becomes a very serious topic, which then all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is a political conversation. Oh, maybe I do care a little bit about politics now that my kids' lives are at risk. But yeah, so there is that. I mean, I don't want to say I don't care, like, completely. I'm not saying that in a lackluster, irresponsible way. I just mean that I don't want my day-to-day life and my mind to be wrapped around all that all the time. I don't want that to be my lighthouse.
I'm saying it too, because I actually care significantly. I follow it. I read it. I study it.
Which I literally, sometimes I'll call you and say, Miles, I got a dumb question. Can you help? Can you please help me answer? Who's this guy they're talking about now?
I follow it, and I'm active. I'm involved, but I'm not active and involved out loud. It's not the platform I'm trying to create.
Right.
I'm wanting to have these conversations where they matter, show my cards to the ability to build trust with people so that we can find a way forward together. I really believe that's the way forward. It's the only chance we got. Right. Otherwise, we're going to get further apart, which is not fun. Last thing I want you to leave us with, it's really a two-parter, and then we'll wrap it up. The critics. We started this conversation because I think you have, and I love this, by the way, because I think historically you've never used this part of your skill set, just conversation, orator. You've even told me before over the last few years, I don't think I'm any good at it. And I'd even hear you segue a song or sit in a writer's round and tell a story. And I was like, dude, you're way better at it than you think. You've just always done it musically, and you've kept the other part. So I'm glad to see, I saw you on a podcast this morning. I think it was on iHeart maybe. And I was like, yes, I want to see you out talking more.
Cool.
I want to see people get to know you more. We started this conversation with, like, who's the guy that is this mystery that everybody thinks they know because he hadn't talked about himself very much, and you wanted to be known. Somebody that doesn't drive the narrative themselves leaves a gap for people to make up the narrative about them, which you've done. And now you're turning this new corner. It's like, no, I actually want them to hear from me. I'd like to in that wake, you've had a ton of critics.
Mm-hmm.
Still got some. You'll still have more going forward. May have more after this show. I don't know.
Totally. Bring them all.
Is there a message that you'd want to leave for those that you feel like have misunderstood you or given you a hard time? What would you want them to know?
You know, there's first thing that just popped into my mind is if you want to be a critic, then criticize me for truth, and I'm okay with it. I literally, in my mind, I'm like, why does it bother me when people criticize? It really only bothers me if it's not true, because I'm pretty confident in who I am. I'm pretty confident in my faith, and I usually mean everything I say, and I'm just kind of like that kind of guy. So it's hard for me to feel misunderstood and then be criticized for something that's actually not true. Like so many times I'll be talking to Hayley, like this person online, if they actually knew me, they're criticizing me. And that's the exact opposite of who I am. They literally, if they knew me, they'd probably think the complete opposite, right? They would probably think, oh, we're great. He's just like me, blah, blah, blah. So I think that for some reason, that would be what bothers me about the critics. And I would tell the critics that if I could speak to them to, hey, don't believe everything on the internet and get to know me for who I am and the truth around who I am and the truth around all the narratives. And then if you still want to criticize me, then be my guest, because I truly understand that you're not going to avoid all criticism. And I don't think we were meant to. I think we were meant to take some criticism. Some of my biggest heroes in life, including Jesus, got highly criticized. So for me to think that I can just play neutral enough to never get criticized is not the path I want to take. So yeah, criticize me all day, but I encourage you to find the truth before you get to, doing the criticizing.
And then the second part of this would be, I was pretty moved earlier in our conversation when I started to get to know your dad more, because we had a moment there, because I feel like I know you, and then I was like, I got to know you 3 layers deeper. And when I got to know your dad more and hearing you really slow that story down and tell it, like you really told that story. And that was a great moment. I make up that our kids growing up in the world that we grow up in, I mean, the way I go back and look at my dad's history, my mom's history is black and white photos. They don't have this kind of stuff out in the world. There was no content then. There was no video cameras in everybody's hands. And it's a whole different experience. But I make up that they know parts of us that their developmental brains at their age can handle. And then when they're 18 and 25, God willing, we're all still here. Right. Then they're going to know other parts of us. Right. And one of the ways they're going to define that is through breadcrumb trails back to conversations like these. And so if your kids are young adults, 18 to 25, and they dig this up, a message that you have for them.
Ooh, that's a good one, Milo. I think my hope would be that the message they would hear would be follow your heart and follow Jesus and love people well. I think that's maybe follow Jesus first and then follow your heart. But either way, I do think those 3, I think it's pretty simple in life from a parental standpoint, what I want my kids to lean into as they get older. And even through all these conversations, if I had followed my heart and followed Jesus a bit better and loved people well, some of these outcomes may have been a bit different, you know what I mean? And I think if they're gonna dig this up, I think that's what I would want them to take away from it for sure. And that and also, I hope they already know this, but their dad is not perfect, and he is gonna mess up and mess up again. And then I'm gonna try to repair. So I think when I was growing up, I thought my dad was perfect and invincible, and mom the same way. Almost physically invincible. I remember like, oh, and even till my dad passed away, I remember just thinking, oh yeah, he can make it through anything. He's invincible. And I think as I've gotten older, there's been disappointments in realizing, oh, they're not perfect, or they didn't know everything. And I already tell my kids that now. Your dad's not perfect, and I'm going to mess up, and I definitely don't know anything, and we're all learning together. But they still think you are. They still think you're a superhero. You know what I mean? And so I'd want them to know I did my best, but I'm not perfect and never will be. So maybe between all those things, they can take something.
Well said. Well, this was a great conversation. I value all the time I get to have with you and friends like you, and it was courageous to lean into some of this. Part of it, I'm so protective of my folks. I don't want the narrative to get lost because of the headline, and I know it's going to, but we got to tell the narrative anyway. And I want you to feel heard, valued, no matter what comes out of this thing. And I also want the critics that are criticizing me or you for walking into any of this territory to know I'm glad you're here. I hope you see the human in us, and I hope if you do, or when you do take some shots, that they might not be cheap shots, but they might be like, hey, appreciate the conversation,
it'll be a challenge,
but I disagree. And
right.
Just if you can put a little context in it. And I say the same thing. I really want to be honoring towards, I think this could also get turned like it does. Because if I was sitting here talking to BK, I get turned towards you and Hayley and BK and Brittany. This is meant to be an honoring conversation.
Yeah.
It just happens to be that y'all are the other side of part of it. And so if you hear anything, wade through the headlines and hear this part, the whole intent of telling this story is to try to just be respectful to the people who are a part of it. And that's certainly what we hope to do with y'all. And I think that's how you move about the world. It's how I choose to move about the world. And it's the whole point of why we're doing Human School to begin with. So I really appreciate you being a part of it.
Man, I love being here. I love chatting with you always. And yeah, I hope so too. I hope people feel encouraged and uplifted. I hope even the Kelleys, I hope they know that I love them and I'm grateful for them, and really want nothing but the best for them as well, and excited for what the future holds. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. Thanks for opening up the opportunity to just be real and be vulnerable and lean into some of this. So it's always fun, Milo. Appreciate
All right,
it,
brother. Good stuff.